We are with some interesting thinkers here. A lot of people back from previous days. Yeah, so let's jump into it. First, Canadian Populist Left, CPL. CPL, thanks for being here. And newly shaved, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. I was thinking of those protesters in the States a couple months ago who were protesting. They wanted the economy up for haircuts. So I picked myself up by my bootstraps and took personal responsibility and grabbed the clippers. And so the conservatives inspired me on that. So I'd extend those conservatives, grab some clippers, and give yourself a good old, personal responsibility haircut. So there you go.
Good for you, dude.
Right, just down.
Appreciate it. Hey. Right. You moved to America with that kind of attitude. Way to go.
Yeah.
I know. There you go. It's just me being cheeky, but yeah.
Well, nice to see you as always, buddy. Thank you for coming through. Next, we have Freems.
Good beer.
We've only had our Freems here once, quite a while ago. How are you doing, Freems? Thanks for coming back. I'm sorry that your power is out, but maybe...
This is my manifesto writing light, so... I'll be typing it as we get through this panel, too, so...
Gotcha. Freems, yeah, how you doing today?
Well, I'm doing good, man. Just got off work a little bit ago, so... Yeah. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you stopping by after so long. The next person is Eucharist. Eucharist, hey, you're a person who often doesn't agree with the rest of us, which is very valuable. Nice to see you again.
I guess I'm part of the elite echelon of conservatives who get to run in these circles. It's great.
Yeah. Very exclusive club, very exclusive. But yeah, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Next, Revolt Rise. Hey man, thanks for coming through the other day. We were having that discussion with Joe Lewis, actually.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for letting me mauled on your stream for 20 minutes.
That's pretty much what happened. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. You just got increasingly angry at no one in particular.
I mean, we were talking Nira Tandon, and I feel like there wasn't nearly enough vitriol thrown her way. I still feel like I left it a little short.
Fair.
All right. Well, you get a second crack at it here tonight.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Next, another member of the elite crew, Branto Box. Thanks for being here. As always, we always have a good time when Branto comes through. Oh gosh,
thank you.
We always have a good time when you're here. So thanks for stopping by.
Always appreciate the invite, man. Sometimes sometimes I can't make it, and sometimes I'm like I don't want to argue tonight, and so I just I say no, I can't make it, but but otherwise I always appreciate the invite, so thank you.
Yeah, sure. There's so many nights where I'm just done. I don't want to go live. I just want to chill. But the show must go on. No choice about it. So I thank you all when you guys decide to also hit go live and come on.
That's why you're a partner, man, because you do it.
Yeah, I guess.
Out here in the salt mines.
Exactly. A miner.
Riverboat Jack. Thanks for being here. Riverboat Jack, you are the first lady type to be on this panel in particular. We've been looking to have women. I've been saying it for the last few weeks. I'm like, it's weird. We've never had a woman on this panel. I have women on all my other panels, but just not this one for whatever reason.
Gotta break that glass ceiling.
Damn right. Shattered it. All right. Hillary Clinton would be proud.
Oh gosh. How dare you insult me like this? I come in on the show the last minute, you throw that my way?
And this is why.
Well, all right. Well, it's got to be awkward, or else what's the point? Thank you for being here, Riverboat. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I slept for 26 hours. I hibernated after finishing my stream last night. I'm feeling really good, so I'm ready for whatever this panel is.
Yeah, I slept most of the day too. Like it wasn't even an especially long like stream for me last night, but I just was out. I woke up and most of the day was gone. And then like I did a few things and I went back to sleep. So yeah, I don't know. All right. Well, thanks for being here. And
Yeah.
also Spectre, my mod, my compadre, Spectre, back at it. Helps me put together this program, helps me out. Spectre, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, but given the way that you just introduced Riverboat Jack, I'd just like to clarify, I actually have nothing to do with putting these panels together, like, at all. Yeah, like nothing whatsoever. This isn't a thing. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm good, man. It's been a good week. I've been taking a break from streaming just to I can do that because I'm a human being and I can make that decision. It's fucking awesome. So I'm a little bit of an advantage here because I'm actually like primed and ready to start arguing because I haven't like been yelling at chat all week. So yeah, let's go.
All right, all right, all right. We all know this is more of a chill stream. We don't really yell at each other here.
I hope it's chill.
Yeah,
Never
keep it
happens.
neutral. Never happens. Surely not on my channel. Okay, so I'll get started. Freems, you seemed pretty pumped to talk about infrastructure. The infrastructure report card has been released. And in case you don't know what I'm talking about, the infrastructure report card is a group of engineers, right? There's a group of engineers who go around and look at the infrastructure here in the United States, the roads, the bridges, the other things, and they get a grade, right? And I can put the link in the chat for everyone to take a look at it themselves. Damn it, clicked on something. All right. And yeah, I'll put a link in chat for you all. Okay. So that's the link to the PDF. If you haven't seen this yet. This one is this. Oh, is this just West Virginia's? Okay, this is just West Virginia's. Okay, that's fine. West Virginia's grades aren't looking great. West Virginia got a D plus for bridges, a D for dams, a D for drinking water. That's always fun. A D plus for roads, and a D for wastewater. And the GPA of D, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. So, well, I mean, it's very consistent. All right. So
Right.
there's that. Highly consistent there. And so, yeah, this is disastrous as a nation.
Oh, it gets worse. Wait till I start talking about it.
No,
This-
yeah.
This whole thing is bullshit.
Yeah.
I'll go into why here in a minute.
You get cold, friends. You look like you're bundled up.
Brenda, mind your own business, okay?
I'm making you my business, my friend.
Okay. All right. Well, then, but these grades I know aren't that much different for the rest of the nation. So this is just a sample.
America's overall infrastructure grade was a D plus, by the way.
Yeah,
See?
something like that.
See
Overall.
that?
Right.
The
But-
plus is the extra. That's
So-
good.
Number one, baby.
You could have slacked off a little harder and still passed.
So, like, I would ask you guys to all go look at your states because as soon as I started reading through mine, I got excited to read this thing anyways because I'm big on infrastructure. I'm a bit of a water advocate here. They didn't address like all the problems, like some of the real major glaring problems, and it seems like they didn't do that in order to protect industries that are killing us, basically. Like, there's no mention of the chemicals being leaked into our water by the chemical plants. There's no mention of the coal slurries that are scattered all across the state, leaking into the ground. Like, they mention the water pipes being shitty and that our treatable water is coming out of those pipes. What they don't mention is the bad water coming from those slurry ponds, going back into those pipes, and then coming through our taps. Like, I have such a bad, my experience with drinking water in West Virginia is so bad that when I travel, I still can't bring myself to drink tap water. Like, it freaks me out.
Damn.
I woke up one morning in Charleston, West Virginia, and my water smelled like licorice.
Whoa.
And turned out that there was a big chemical leak. No touch advisory. Don't touch the water. So, like, why are we letting... Because this is done in conjunction with the state. They worked with Jim Justice. They worked with the Department of Highways. for these infrastructure grades. How are they getting away with not mentioning this stuff? Like, how is this okay? How do we fix this? Because I don't know. It's pretty frustrating, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if you guys look at your states, if you follow the infrastructure and problems within your state, you'll probably also find stuff like, oh wait, they completely left this out. Why are they leaving this out? And my only thing could be is because the Republican Party in West Virginia is still telling people that the coal's coming back, for one thing, which isn't possible because of the market. Like, it's not possible. Nor should it be. Nor should an entire state's, over 1 million people, their lives shouldn't hinge on whether or not a extraction industry is there or not. I don't know. I don't think there's much to debate on this, but just want to get your guys' thoughts.
I mean, is the whole state built on coal? Was it historically built on coal?
Yeah, that's like West Virginia. West Virginia, being a small state, produced I think at 1.70% of America's electricity.
Well, at that point, then how could the state possibly maintain itself without its
here's the problem,
key function?
Here's the
I'm not
problem.
saying this needs to be this way. I'm just saying
this didn't happen overnight.
No.
And there was times where this state did have a lot of money, maybe not compared with the rest of the state. Why are they waiting? Oh, there's more to it as well. So the solutions they are putting forth are solutions they've already tried to do, but they took that money and put it in the subsidy for coal mines to reopen in a market that can't sustain coal mines. Guess what happens? Those coal mines go bankrupt. And then the CEOs and the board members, they get nice little severance packages.
Right.
While the workers,
of course. Golden parachute.
Right. While the workers are fucked. Now West Virginia is ranked in the top 5 in poverty, top 5 in obesity, top 5 in depression, top 5 in drugs. And they're still not addressing the problem.
So I got to ask you, now I don't mean to derail or, I don't know if we're into this topic now or everybody's, but what does West Virginia, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What does West Virginia do now? I mean, what does it do now? What is the future of West Virginia?
This is where it gets really, really fucky, in my opinion. West Virginia trusted the DNC for a century. And the DNC got them
big problem. No, I'm fucking go.
Right. The DNC gets them in this situation, and then people like Donald Trump and Jim Justice will boldly lie to their face because it is a bold lie. Like everyone knows it. Like the market can't sustain coal, but they're telling them they're going to bring it back and blame it on Democratic EPA regulations, which the DNC doesn't give a fuck either. So of course they're going to vote Republican because these people are desperate because of all the other reasons I just listed.
Okay.
Like I get to drive through the state and see people with like dirt floors, people that are struggling not just to live, like to put food on their families' tables.
Gotcha.
And
I'm not trying to be dismissed. I'm not trying to be callous.
I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you.
I know.
Every time I talk about this, I get pretty heated
because I gotcha.
I feel like West Virginia, not just West Virginia, America as a whole has no fucking leadership. Right. It's not going to have leadership now either, I don't think personally, but has no leadership.
May I really quick? I think I can answer what you're trying to get at here.
Sure. Yeah, I do want to hear Freeze, but I want to hear you too. Yes, please.
So, because I feel like we're kind of like just going and
there's a lot of stuff I was
I know, but
yeah,
I want to address your stuff, right? So, like, what your concern is, like, well, coal mining is what brings in all the money. That's what creates all the jobs for this state. We have to subsidize it because we have to keep these jobs around. Here's the thing. There's actually a very lovely nonprofit organization, not in West Virginia, in Kentucky, that takes coal miners and retrains them to do IT. Like, literally.
Are you kidding right now?
For like the last 40 years, I'm not saying IT, just for the record, but I'm saying like if for the last 40 years, instead of like subsidizing coal, which we could all agree is a dying industry that's being propped up by subsidies, they were actually retraining the workers. That would have been a better use of the government's money, no?
Right, for sure. I thought you were doing a meme for a second.
Yeah.
No,
you're fine.
Learn to me.
I'm not doing
Hear me out on this. What I think makes even more sense, is to create a federal jobs program, maybe.
Yep.
Instead of pumping money in the coal mines, pay all these laborers that don't have work. If you look at the thing, a lot of the infrastructure problems are going to take 2 decades to fix.
Right.
That's 20 years worth of work. Why don't we pay people in the state to fix the infrastructure?
So
and it makes it more viable whenever renewable energy wants to come through. That they're going to come to these places. They're not going to come now because we don't. I know places at my mom's house that still have dial-up internet. Dude. Can't even get high-speed internet because the infrastructure is so shit.
Damn.
If a frisk breeze comes by, my power goes because the infrastructure is so bad.
okay, I'm
And
only
the place
so
that-
my point is I didn't want to interrupt you because you're going on about the like many of the things that are like serious problems that people are experiencing, right? And I didn't want to diminish it, so I want to hear that out. And I understand that what you're saying now is like you can rebuild the infrastructure because just like from the grades and the link that was posted, it's also bad and it all needs to be rebuilt and that's 20 years worth of jobs, right?
Yeah.
But like to rebuild the infrastructure, and you have to ask like, not to diminish anything, what is the function of like West Virginia if it's not producing coal and power? Like, what does it become a hub for? What can it produce or serve? Like to rebuild the infrastructure. Now the infrastructure is facilitating like what?
Right. So
The future.
yeah,
So
I'm
what
all
is the future?
for pushing renewable energy and cannabis, two things which West Virginia is great for.
Cannabis?
Yeah.
That might do it.
Yeah,
That might be the
outdoor growing
one.
conditions
West
are
Virginia
actually
historically,
amazing.
West
Industrial
Virginia
hemp.
historically is. Oh, good. Go ahead. Sorry, I've
Would be
taken.
fucking crazy. Yeah, that would be a really good idea, actually.
No, I was just agreeing with you. Like outdoor growing conditions in West Virginia are like optimal for it, and our founders knew this too and grew hemp there as well. So I mean, yeah, like
Exactly.
Why
Like
the fuck
industrial
not?
hemp is going to be a huge industry, and like it'd be a great place for it.
Well, and
it's cheaper than paper as we make it now.
Well, and also, if you make West Virginia like a hub for creating like the infrastructure that the rest of the country needs, I mean that's all kinds of work for the foreseeable future because our entire country has a grade of D plus. On top of that, like if we're talking about renewable energy, like that's stuff we can export around the world. That's going to be an ongoing project for generations. So
sure.
like there are ways we can pivot away from these coal jobs. And you know, if that means providing however many coal miners there are left, like 50,000 with like severance packages so they can go whether they want to use that money to go get trained in programming or just, you know, build a better house, you know, whatever they want to use it for, give them a package that allows them to do that because they've put their bodies and their lives on the line for this country for a very long time. And they deserve it.
I was a coal miner for 4 years.
If shit drops out, apologize. I'm having some weird issue, but just let you know.
I would say I would add in terms of any of the states that are sort of involved in like, I guess what many in the left sort of consider more damaging extractionary industries, a lot of the energy. You're basically going to have to give them like the biggest bribe ever in a lot of those states to come around and like actually exactly where Frames is talking about, massive reinvestment in like proper areas. And I mean, there's a lot of creative things you can do. Like there's good ideas here, whether cannabis or whatever. Even if you're doing niche, certain niche building and research, like even if you are doing cannabis, you could also make it a hub for research in cannabis as well. And you could even allow those, you don't have to build that into the city. You could also build that research institution somewhere a little bit more rural, which, you know, will bring other jobs once you have, you know, because I always bring up Olds in Alberta. I mean, it's sort of like the agriculture research hub of Alberta. And that's kind of where people go. It's super fast internet there. I mean, it's a research institution. Other jobs end up following because, you know, it's a hub and it brings in, talented people that, you know, it gives that sort of rural area a bit of life. And so, I mean, there's opportunities there, but you're always going to come to, you know, probably we can't afford it. Or when you say, actually, we can't afford it, well, that's socialism. And then you get down this whole goddamn train. But anyway, yeah.
Not socialism.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that's the classic line, right? Like anytime the government.
Also, okay, speaking of, I've even molded on the second half of this chat, which we'll get to here in a minute. But yeah,
Can I just add real quick? And a slight pivot, but it's relevant, I think. Like in the fracking industry, talking about getting rid of fracking in Pennsylvania, there's 20 years of capping wells that needs to be done. Like if we stop fracking today, it would take our current workforce 20 years to cap all the wells and like clean everything up. So like one of the things that I think we should be doing in situations like that is offering like a permanent like job guarantee for everybody in that industry with a wage guarantee, and basically the government will step in and subsidize or basically employ the people that are going to be doing the capping and the cleanup. And I feel like the same thing could be true for the miners, like who's ever left working in mines. At least like that would give confidence to the workers, and like it's productive work that we literally need to do, and keeping like incomes coming in the areas where we have them, and maybe even expanding the industry to rehire some laid off workers to be doing that kind of work, I think is probably like a really productive and popular way to handle that situation.
And also, I think that a lot of the fear mongering around socialism is largely due to the fact that like these people have not seen socialist policies that actually benefit their lives. Like if you give them health care and they can suddenly go get treated for cancer or go to the doctor just to get a checkup, like these are things that tangibly improve people's lives. Like if you give them programs that actually work and actually like they can tangibly see in their lives, I think these things become less scary and less daunting and much harder to fearmonger against.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right too. And like this has been one of my, I don't want to say my most divisive takes lately going around Twitch is that like I see like West Virginia, I think voted for Trump at a higher percentage than any other state, at least in the top 3. I'm pretty sure they were number 1. I can't remember.
They were up there.
It's not because they just love Donald Trump. The DNC just completely ignored him, and they fucked them for like seven decades. Yep. So it's hard to even push anything through the DNC at them. So I don't know how to reach people. It's really difficult.
Well, first of all, I don't get how that's divisive. It sounds like you're stating facts because both of your things.
Look at Chud Logic's comments on his YouTube channel, and
God. I hate the internet some days. But yeah, I mean, look, this is very simple to me as far as I'm concerned, right? Like we all agree that we need roads. We need like clean drinking water. We all agree that we need these things. Like the private market isn't taking care of the problem. There's no incentive to do so. What situation does that leave us in? It leaves us in a situation where there are jobs that we all agree need to be done, but nobody is getting paid to do them because there is no profit to be extracted from their labor in the process. So what is the answer? Given where we are right now in society? Yeah, it's a fucking federal jobs guarantee. FDR did it. This isn't rocket surgery. We've been here before. I don't know what about this is controversial, to be honest.
Well, and just to like put this in perspective, like we've printed literally trillions of dollars and injected it into our economy over like the last 2 economic downturns. Like we can cover the costs of these programs if we really want to. The issue just seems to be that the people in power are more beholden to private interests who are more interested in continuing to extract money from coal than actually investing in infrastructure.
It just sucks that like there's a statistic there, you can see it, people are suffering, we live in the richest country in the world. Fucking fix it. Like it shouldn't be that hard. Fucking fix it. Quit trying to worry about how you can make rich people richer and fix it. It doesn't seem like it's that difficult, but
is that is that easier said than done though?
Yeah.
I mean
like most things.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the problem
only
is
because of who holds power, though, is the only reason why. But okay, go on.
I think go ahead.
I was just going to say, part of the problem is we have studies on this, and it shows that like no matter how popular a position is, in our government, there's a 30% chance that it's going to pass, whether it has 0% support or 100% support. And that's because our government is so beholden to these private interests. We need to get money out of politics in order to actually get these problems fixed. And that's going to take some doing on state levels all across the country.
Eucharist, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess I think you have a good point, Riverboat, and I don't. Is Riverboat fine? I don't know what else.
Or you can call me Jack. It's fine.
Jack,
my name is Jack. You can call me.
Great, Jack. Nice to meet you. I think there's there's like 2 issues, and there's kind of a conversation going on in chat about this that I think is interesting. Is like one, I think there's maybe a legitimate discussion to be had about whether or not some of the programs that we all seem to agree on, which is kind of why we're all here, are like properly characterized as socialist rather than something that maybe we could all agree on and maybe it doesn't, distinctively characterize socialism. Like, but even if they are, even if we want to make the argument that they are distinctively socialist policies, the fact that someone directly benefits from them won't necessarily change their minds on socialism. I think we see this all the time, right? We like lots and lots of people benefit from social welfare programs. People have mentioned in the chat, police, fire departments, all sorts of things. And it's still, the damn socialism is just so hard to, you can't change minds on this, and you can list all these things. They're like, well, no, that's not socialism. So it's like, it's a tough sell to me that even if we, if we manage to fund and put in place some policies that directly benefit a bunch of people, that we're going to change that kind of gut reaction that you see, like my friend Greglock is talking about in public opinion, just this gut reaction against the concept of socialism that's baked in for so long in so many parts of the U.S. And then just a question that I had for all of you is, like infrastructure stuff is way outside of my wheelhouse. We're getting into policy that I just don't understand. But fixing it, how? Like I think back to like my own hometown, near where Spectre and I grew up, in Tennessee, that if on the local level it's just an abject failure, right? There's bridges crumbling, there's terrible things happening, and what does the city spend money on? They spend it on like an aquatic center, right? So like on a local level they do terrible things with the funds that they do have. They don't fix infrastructure. And then on the state level, Tennessee, obviously not a shining star of infrastructure either. I'm sure we're pretty close to West Virginia on a lot of things. So solutions just escape me, and again, this is outside of my wheelhouse, so I just be interested to hear you guys.
Yeah, like I said, I still stand by a federal jobs program, especially in a place that is places that are not just West Virginia, but a lot of places. A lot of people can't find work, or at least work that gives them a dignified pay. And because you hear about all the jobs created, they're not high-paying jobs, they're not good-paying jobs. Like minimum wage in West Virginia is $7.25 an hour, maybe $8.25. Can't remember. It's low. You can't live on that even in West Virginia. So, I go with federal jobs program. I think it just makes sense.
I agree. It's a good opportunity to open a bunch of worker-owned co-ops too. Like, I mean, this would be a great opportunity for, instead of the government employing everybody, to like make some private sector industry and but build it up as being like worker-controlled. Like, I mean, I'm sure. I mean, and maybe you can speak to this directly, Freems, but like, I'm sure that the coal miners, if they owned the coal mines the whole time, would have done things a lot differently, and a lot more of that wealth would have stayed inside the state and not been in one person's pocket. That
actually is a very, very good point, because another thing people don't realize. A vast majority of the coal mines in West Virginia were owned by people not from West Virginia, just in general. Like they were shipping the money out faster than they were shipping the coal out. So
same with Alberta, same thing. It's all like some foreign rich fucking money coming. It's all just like, and they talk about it like it's Alberta oil. It's not. It's foreign oil for foreign interests. Like.
Interesting trivia: the Bin Laden family actually owns all three major refineries in Houston. So,
ooh, there we go, Bin Laden. There we go.
Who's that?
Who's that?
I'm kidding. Sorry.
Seriously, one of the things that does kind of annoy me when we have these conversations is people are like, but it's socialism. We can't do socialism. Like, no one is talking about workers like controlling the means of production. Like Revolt Rise kind of went there with the I am too, comrade. Don't worry, I'm there with you. But for right now, we're literally just talking about very basic Keynesian economic policies that every single other liberal democracy on this fucking rock seems to understand are probably a good thing to do, because you can't extract surplus value from the labor of the working class if they're fucking dead. Like, I mean,
yeah. So like
socialism, it's just not like, we're not even talking about that. We're just talking about like basic, like where we need to fix the fucking economy.
Okay,
and I'd also keep in mind, like, whatever is proposed, they'll call it socialism.
Well,
like, no matter what you do, the words coming out, it doesn't even fucking matter. So I mean,
Joe Biden.
It's like any idea you push forward that's going to help people gets called socialism. I typically, especially when I'm talking to people from where I live, I stay away from all isms in general, because I know when I bring up an ism, they're not going to know what I'm talking about. They'll just view it as negative or positive. I got called a Marxist the other day for talking about Medicare for all.
Oh no!
Describe to me what a Marxist. I mean, they use like, like.
I mean,
right-wing media, right-wing politicians are real good about using these buzzwords to scare people.
Yeah. I mean, like,
What-
this is
Hold
why,
up.
like, for you, Chris, I would just kind of respond, like, fundamentally, this isn't an issue about implementing socialism. This is more of an issue of branding and marketing. And, like, we can call this a wide variety of things. We can call it economic freedom. We can call it, you know, opportunity revitalization, whatever we call it. Like this is the same thing we saw with like Medicare for all, and like, or not Medicare for all, but like Obamacare versus the Affordable Care Act. Like it's just a branding issue. And like
Right.
I think that there are two sides to this. One side, we need to have people out there, I think, flatter myself, like me, who talk about what socialism actually means and kind of destigmatize it and talk about, you know, here are, you know, some pretty sensible ways we could actually become socialist. And then we also need people who are like, yeah, no, this is from the other side saying, no, these are policies that we can do, and they're not necessarily socialist. They're just sensible economic decisions. Even if we want to maintain capitalism, you need the roads, you need clean drinking water. You can't be poisoning people for a healthy society.
And I think it's important to know what crowd you're speaking to as well when you talk about these things. Like I'm not gonna go to like a country bar here in West Virginia and be like, let me tell you all about socialism, because they're gonna throw me out within the first 5 minutes.
Can I ask you guys a question? What do you think it is that people on the right, or generally maybe in just Freems' area, have against socialism? What are they afraid of? What do they not like? Why are they against it?
I think it's because the people here in my area got promised coal jobs back from Donald Trump, and they've been drinking the MAGA Kool-Aid a little bit too hard. That's what I think.
Okay, so
And
I think
50 years of CIA propaganda against communism and socialism is mostly the reason. Like
That
I would
as
say
well.
for the whole country.
Yeah, I mean,
America is very good at propaganda.
yeah, it's the propaganda, but also like there is still the stigma of like before the ideological switch between the Democratic and the Republican parties. And like there are still people who remember before that time who are like, yeah, I remember when the Democrats screwed over this land. You know, they learned from their grandpappy about how the Democrats worked with Pinkertons. Like stuff like that. It like there are a lot of layers to this depending on where you are.
okay, all right.
And just real quick, wow, that sucks. How about now? All right, yeah, just real quick. I'm looking at a poll right here that's got 62% support for the ACA and 38% support for Obamacare for the exact same population of people.
Sure,
Right. Yeah. like Jack was saying, I think some of this might be branding, right? There is a gut reaction against socialism, whether or not anyone can give content to what socialism is. It's the same problem that like right-wing pundits point to on college campuses, right? All of these kids who say they support socialism then can't really tell you what it is or not. You know, it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We choose buzzwords and we have heuristics and everything, but it's like there's a gut reaction for or against socialism depending on which kind of camp you fall into. And so, yeah, I think reducing it to the level of policy, like, yeah, standard of living or you know, jobs programs, things like that. Like people can call it socialism, but yeah, maybe it is partially just a branding thing. There was an earlier question though that I thought was really interesting. The like, what is West Virginia for question. And I don't know, maybe it's backtracking too much to go back to that, so I'll throw something out there and then stop talking. But
Sure.
I had a thought about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I recently read Jane Jacobs' Cities and the Wealth of Nations, and that reminded me of that. And it seems like to a certain extent our infrastructure problems are like a sustainability problem, not entirely, but if I wanted to be really simplistic about it, partially a sustainability problem where we invest in things that we know aren't sustainable without the funds to sustain them, and then we let them rot. And we see that in places like West Virginia or parts of Appalachia, right, that are dominated by one industry that's export focused. And she talks about how in Cities in the Wealth of Nations, how like you can just see this, like prospering cities are cities that are able to like import replace. Like there's something that we get from other people, but eventually we develop our own industries to replace it and then do a better version of that and then start exporting it. And there's a cycle. It's like a laddering cycle of cooperative cities building up on each other. But when you're exclusively export focused, well, that can just collapse at any time, right? When it becomes clear that either, you know, we're running out of a non-renewable resource or that we're, you know, I don't know, wrecking the world. There comes a point when the export can't be sustained anymore. And then once you take that away, the city collapses. And she gives lots of examples of this in history. But it just seems like partially to me, just what we're seeing now in this infrastructure report card, what we're seeing now in these gutted parts of the country is like, we just had a really unsustainable vision for a long time. We focused exclusively on exporting something, and we built a lot of stuff that couldn't support it. And now that it's gone, it's gone. And what do we do? I don't know. I don't have solutions.
I guess, okay, so I just want to follow up. I want to give my answer. I know you guys, so like we're here, and then I've talked to many people about this and say like propaganda or, you know, misinformation and things like that. And I think like people's inherent hesitation or opposition against socialism is the idea of increased reliance on government. Like the more you increase your reliance on government, that is antithetical to like the idea of self-reliance, which is like an American ethos.
But you understand that socialism has nothing to do, like, this is the whole thing, and this is what we're talking about with propaganda and the Red Scare. Socialism, by definition, has literally nothing to do with government control. That's what I'm saying. What you guys are scared of is Keynesian economic policies.
Sure. I was trying to speak to you a little earlier, Spectre, just because I understand, but you have like a very pure definition of socialism, right? You have like a definition of socialism that most people maybe would like. If you're talking about government programs, right, that's something people would kind of consider socialist. But you're saying you consider, tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong, because I want to know, like, do you consider socialism to be something like a pure worker-owned seizing means of production kind of thing?
No, but I mean, it doesn't have to be that. Like, I don't need for there to be like an anarcho-syndicalist revolution for me to call it socialism. Like, somebody can go out in America today as a private citizen, and if they have the resources to do so, start a worker co-op. I would consider that to be practicing socialism. And this is like the agreed upon definition. Eucharist, correct me if I'm wrong. You're the poli-sci nerd. Like, this is the agreed upon definition. It's workers controlling the means of production. How you get there is irrelevant to me. That is something that I'd like to see, but I don't feel like it's like even relevant to the current discourse right now, because we're having to fight for stupid stuff like a jobs program. And I want to see people both on the left and the right stop referring to these policies as socialist, because it just kills discourse. It is a thought terminating cliche at this point.
Yeah,
I would also add one thing that's really interesting is when you actually go through like Capital, Marx's Capital, he talks about the government about 3 times in the whole thing. So like it's pretty wild in that regard. So
I wanted to bring something else up too. Like we shit on all these government programs that help poor people, but the same rich people that are going to complain about those and complain about all this individualism love the government shit that keeps the poor people from making money. Like the fact that you have to pay $12,000 to apply for a license to grow or sell marijuana.
Wait, really? They love that? Are you sure they love that?
They don't seem to complain about it as much as setting up things like a federal jobs program. But they don't seem to mind that poor people don't even have the ball to show up to play the game. You know what I mean?
Like so here's
you set up high barrier to entries. Here's like
another example, right? Like we like to have this myth of American individualism, but the fact is we live, you know, the meme, we live in a society, right? Like whether or not we want to, like we don't, like we're not people living in isolated log cabins anymore in the middle of nowhere. Like most people in this country like the fact that they live near a fire department who can come and douse their house if it like catches on fire. Most people like that. Most people wouldn't say, yeah, I would prefer if this was privatized. They could more efficiently, put the fire out on my house. Or they could also extort you for money, which is what they did when the fire department first started. So like, there are good reasons and a lot of benefits for having government programs, and government programs aren't limited to just socialism. There are good government programs, there are bad ways of implementing government programs, and I think when people have clear benefits from them, like they do from the fire department helps you to live that kind of individualist life. It helps us collectively bear the costs of living in a society more efficiently than if we had private fire departments. And similarly, public plans for like healthcare would more efficiently bear the costs to society than privatized healthcare plans. These are just like objective facts, essentially. So we as a society need to kind of get together and be like, well, do we want to inefficiently bear this cost, or do we want to efficiently bear the cost? That's the fundamental question here. And in a lot of cases, for things that people need in order to live, I think the argument very much goes in favor of collectively bearing those costs intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
I would add too, like, you can also, I totally agree with you, but you could also say the same thing and reword it depending if you're talking to someone who's very like more economically minded, in the sense of like the whole reason you have a single payer healthcare system is to make the private sector more competitive. It takes the costs out of the private sector. Employers don't have to deal with it. Labor doesn't have to deal with it. So they can actually, get the medical treatment they need. They can show up at the job. They can get that done. So if that's what it takes to talk to people on that level, then like fine. I mean, that's typically, I don't have to talk like that in like left wing circles. We're like, yeah, I get it, but so it also comes down to like who you're talking to, and hopefully it's not online. Hopefully you're able to do it like in person. Well, not during COVID, but a one-on-one, and yeah, it's probably more productive in that regard.
I mean, I feel like we're getting kind of, but going back to what Spectre said, like we're getting kind of bogged down in the word, I guess, because I mean, nobody really agrees. There are technical definitions, but nobody really knows what we mean when we say socialism, especially when it's somebody reacting against a policy because they think it's socialist, right? So yeah, I mean, Jack is absolutely correct. Like, government programs do not equal socialism, and clearly no one thinks that, because there are lots of people who benefit from government programs that they like very much and wouldn't call them socialism. Like, there's some connection to means of production and ownership by our representatives and all this, commonly owned or owned, like the civic apparatus, our representatives, whatever, control this. I mean, we've talked about this before on this panel just a couple of weeks ago. Like, oh, hey, when we're talking about, making private industries make certain things like masks and hand sanitizer, like, that's actual socialism. Now we're getting into it. Like, but that's, having your freaking city build a road and provide your water and have a fire department. Nobody seems to really think like this is terrible socialism that we want to get rid of. And so, yeah, a branding problem, I don't know, but maybe it just takes like sitting someone down and walking them through all of the government programs that they benefit from and don't think are socialism, to convince them that there's no actual content for the word socialism in their brain.
Yeah, so that's the thing. We don't have like a political force, like a major political force that's actually backing the concept of socialism. As CPL said previously, it doesn't matter what you call it, right? Like, if it's done by a Democrat, it's going to be called socialism in which way. So, like, I'm not for running away from the label. Instead, I'd make the label a positive thing, and that will take time. It's not something that happen overnight, right? Excuse me.
How much time do we have? I don't know. Like, it seems like things are pretty dire right now, especially with
things
climate
are always
change.
dire in America.
Life expectancy in West Virginia right now is 66 years old in certain counties. It's like that's on par with the third world country.
Okay, yeah, but talking about the word socialism is not going to increase or decrease the life expectancy there. Like, that's not a thing. Like, working on all those things and moving ball forward on a single term, which will be attached to anything you do any which way, are not mutually exclusive. You can do both. I'm saying that, like, if it comes up, you actually defend it, saying, well, okay, well, if you're calling out socialism, fine. Well, socialism is making sure that you all have health care to increase that life expectancy you were talking about, right? You can bring that up and relate that to Medicare for all systems. Like, yeah, that's what I call socialism, is making sure that you and your loved ones get the care they need without being bankrupt. It's you and your loved one not having to go to a healthcare fair, which is a thing that they do, where Doctors Without Borders comes to rural West Virginia and Appalachia to give people the care they need because they don't get it otherwise, right? That happens like a few times per year. Like, that's healthcare there, right? That's how I would sell that. You can relate both, make them both a priority, because you need to.
Yeah, and like fundamentally, this is a question of branding, like we said earlier. Like, and you can rebrand something that has a negative connotation now to make it have a good connotation. Like, like, okay, you want to attack me for presenting a policy that gives people healthcare? Okay, yeah, I'm socialist, and my brand of socialism is about making sure you and your family get healthcare. Like, okay, you can slander me that way, I guess. But I think that that's a weird way of attacking people. And this is why I think we need both approaches. We need people to be advocating for the policies, and then we also need to have people explaining what socialism is. And you can do both at the same time. These aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I think if a lot of people understood that socialism doesn't need to look like the Soviet Union and it can look like worker-owned co-ops, I think there'd be a hell of a lot more support for it. But like in that terms, like we don't need to use the word socialism at all either. And I'm an advocate for avoiding it if we can just get to the discourse that it matters. You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah. Again, like I'm not a socialist, but I agree with a lot of like the past couple of weeks have shown me that I have a lot of policy agreement with you people. So like, it seems like kind of an unnecessary trapping almost, where it's like, do we really want to go to the mat on, well, this is a socialist policy? Probably not, given the optics, and also maybe it's not a socialist policy, right? Maybe this is just good policy. Maybe this is just how human beings live together well.
Disagree.
Let's call it good policy.
No, so I
agree.
hard disagree here, because the other side is always hitting us with this, right? And no matter, like, in the media, they make sure to tackle this. It's not like if you ignore this, if you hide under the covers, the big Republicans will change their mind on this, right? No, it's not. Like it didn't always used to be the case, but in the last, since really the Obama administration, really, like everything, no matter what it is socialism. No matter, it's a fucking Republican plan. If it's a Republican healthcare plan, it's socialism. So again, away from this problem. Like this is a thing. This is an ongoing struggle. Let's actually tackle this. Let's not have it run away, and then give Democrats yet another excuse to run away from that good policy you're talking about, right? It's like, well, we don't want to be called socialists, right? Let's not have Democrats constantly in defensive crouch. I'm trying to actually get all those great policies we've been talking about that we want to get done. I want to get them through, and take away a tool of the other side that they will always use against us. They will always use against us. So let's use it against them.
Yeah.
Anyone going to say something now?
I mean, I guess I'm kind of the like, I guess I can see where you're coming from here, but my perspective on it is like there has been a campaign by the government in this country during the Red Scare at one point to rebrand socialism to be nothing but negative. Republicans are constantly trying to paint socialism as nothing but negative. I don't know. I just feel like avoiding the word and clarifying that we're not asking for socialism does have some utility. Rebranding socialism as a good thing to these people feels like a big ask. But I mean, if we can do it, that helps us down the road. But I mean,
it's also it's not a split too as like left and right, because you're talking socialism versus half of the Democratic Party and then all the probably more than half of the Democratic Party and all the Republican Party. It's a bigger fight than like one side or the other. It's a big difference in sides. Doesn't feel like it as much to us because we're all online a lot.
We're all
but like socialism is a scary word to the rural West Virginia Democrat as well as it is to like the rural Tennessee Republican, right? Like it's not like it's party based specific.
Or like the rich New York liberal. Like, I mean, it's
right.
That's why I'm saying though, like obviously this is like because no one has taken up the fight except for Bernie Sanders, right? And AOC. Literally no one has taken up the fight. So of course it's like you're saying,
I will say there's
you finish, bro. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just that no one has actually taken up the fight for this. So instead, we allow both our Republicans and the Democratic corporatist wing to demonize this, right? So like again, it's not like I'm saying that like every campaign like needs to like be waving like the socialist like flag behind them. Like, no, I'm not saying any of that, right? I'm saying simply if it comes up, right? If it comes up, and it will come up, don't run away from the term, because what people don't like, what people like less than socialism is a politician they perceive to be hiding something, or not being honest with them, or weak. To be defensive, right? When they see that, even if they have no idea what the policy is, right? Ignore socialism. You can put insert anything else into that slot, right? If they don't understand the policy, they're like, well, that guy is defensive. He's not. There's something wrong here, right? Because he doesn't want to defend right? This other guy is attacking, right? And they're very confident about their attack. And they're saying this is really bad. And then this person is saying it's a good thing, but I don't know, they're sweating and stuff. So maybe I guess the other guy's winning this debate, right? Why be an offensive crush? It just doesn't make sense. Instead, like, you fucking judo that shit, right? You're like, okay, like this this is you're calling this socialism, right? Okay, well, let's talk about the benefits to the people, right? It's this, and that, right? So if that's socialism, well, I mean, I guess, sure, whatever, right? But I'm talking about is a program that'll be helping your family, putting food on the table of your family, putting money in your pocket, right? That's what I'm talking about. If that's socialism, I guess I'm a socialist, whatever, or something like that. I don't know. But like, don't run away. Like, you got to be confident. You got to be on the attack, which fucking progressives maybe, but liberals certainly never are, right? The left is never on the attack. Be on the attack. That's what I'm saying. Politics, right?
So yeah, that you're pointing to something too that we talked about on my panel like a few weeks ago about how the left also needs to get better at like effective storytelling. Like the right is pretty good at storytelling, and sorry, Brenta, close your ears real quick.
Go ahead, please.
A lot of the storytelling isn't backed by facts. The left has facts, but they don't tell a story for shit, and they can tell a story that is backed by facts. Yeah, I hear stories all the time. This is super anecdotal, but in West Virginia, of like some like pretty severe suffering going on that could be fixed by what you think would be pretty basic problems to fix, but just we would rather just throw statistics at people without any of the with no like pathos to it whatsoever. Like, I don't know.
So I guess I was gonna say, like, you know, like, so for all the things on like what socialism is and like how would you change the narrative and get people to trust it, or whether you would, you know, be on the defense or the offense, it's like there's so many like there's so many rifts, there's so many cultural rifts. There's like, you know, like popular culture and religion and beliefs and economics. It's like the concept of socialism versus capitalism, or government programs versus like individual programs or privatized. That's just like one division between like the two political sides, right? So it's like, well, how would you get people to trust socialism? It's like, well, they don't even trust the party. They don't trust like the other party on like all these other issues. So it's like this trust gap you're trying to bridge on like this one issue is like one pylon, one issue on like the whole range of the political spectrum, right? So it's like, well, how do we bridge this? And it's like, well, the gap is enormous, you know? So it's like, well, how do we get them to trust us on socialism? It's like, how do you get, well, one, do you trust them on capitalism, which would be the opposite question? And then do you trust them on all the other issues that you disagree with them on? And if you don't, are you going to get them to trust you? And if you can't bridge that trust gap, how is any progress ever going to be made on each individual issue?
So I would just kind of echo what Freems just said. It is improving your ability to tell stories. And like, this is something like I studied English literature. I have a background in this, and like, I know it sounds really simple and kind of like saccharine or like whatever, but the power of narrative is incredibly persuasive. Like this is why in this country, like, people think illegal immigrants are a huge problem, despite them not actually being a huge problem. It's because every 4 years or every few years, you know, the Republican Party comes out and they have like, you know, someone whose wife or husband was murdered by an illegal immigrant, and they put them in front of the country, and like these stories affect people. They affect the perception of policy, and like whether or not we want to agree on how effective that is, like the baseline truth is that for thousands of years we have been willing to live and die for narrative, for stories, whether it's the story of a carpenter from Nazareth, or like whether it's some other narrative, you know, whether it's, you know, Hillary Clinton is running like a illegal sex dungeon out of a pizza parlor. Like these narratives are shaping people's lives whether we want them to or not, and so we should tap into that power to actually, you know, be able to tell the story of why we need socialism, whether it's because your friends and family in West Virginia got poisoned by a chemical factory that was dumping chemicals into the local sewage, whether it is some family in Tennessee who was starving during the winter because they couldn't get food and they weren't eligible for any federal programs. Like these are stories that we could be telling and we could be motivating people with, and we just don't, because for a very long time the left has been hooked on this idea that like fact checking and like, oh well, here's the real data, that's going to be like the checkmate and that ends the conversation. But different people are motivated by different things, whether those are facts, whether those are feelings. Facts and feelings are both tools in how we convince people to do things, so we need to use both.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in trying to get, one of the main things I focus on here is trying to get people to quit believing that the meritocracy exists to begin with. Like, especially when talking about things like Medicare for all. There's a story I heard about someone, I think it was in West Virginia, either West Virginia or Kentucky. This dude, he did everything right, worked every day, paid into his retirement, did all the right things. Then he retires. Then he gets sick. Next thing you know, they blow through all their retirement money trying to keep him alive. He dies. When he dies, now his wife should have been set up, but now she's a greeter at Walmart. Just living in an apartment after their house got. Like, that's the stories we should be telling, because that's not the only story like that.
So I think. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna go to Eucharist. He's had his hand up, and then Revolt Rise. But quickly, I'll just say that if you're looking for stories to explain why we need a change in this country, right? Whatever you want to call that change, well, we're surrounded by them here in the age of COVID, right? How many people here are homeless, right? Like, how many people can't put food on their table? Like they're going to food banks, right? How many people are jobless? How many people are afraid to go to the hospital now because they might have COVID, but or something else, but they're afraid of being bankrupt, right? Like those stories are writing themselves every day, right? And since there's so many people, right? It's not just touching those specific people; it's touching their friends and their family, right? So now would be the perfect time to actually say, like, well, okay, well, we have ideas, Again, you don't. I'm not saying I'm not saying that like this has to be the center of your branding, the center of your campaign or anything like that, right? I'm saying put these messages out. Inevitably, the Republicans will come at you saying it's socialism. Well, great. Here's an opportunity to say, well, is that actually so bad? But all right, so we'll go to Eucharist and then we'll go to Revolt Rise.
Yeah, so I mean, Freems, I think, hit it on the head, right? Like this idea of the meritocracy, I think it's starting to get undermined even in like a lot of right-wing circles. And I've been talking to Spectre about this lately, but there are people like, and I know I'm going to throw out people that you guys probably have strong reactions to, but there's people right now like Orrin Cass who are starting like American Compass who are like, hey, there's something broken here, but I want to be on the right. So I want to develop some sort of approach to economic issues, to social issues, whatever, that addresses this and isn't just this, oh yeah, let businesses do whatever they want. No, these things are really broken. Like it's a problem that there was a time when a unionized worker could work a good job on his own, take care of a family, retire, provide for that family. Like that existed and now it doesn't. Like what has changed and how can we fix it? Like that's a conversation that I think is happening on the right as well. And so then going back to, I guess my question, Prime, and I think you just answered it a little bit, was are you saying like this is something like what we really need to do is like own the word, market for it, explain what socialism really is, when like in the context of like this panel, I guess, like all these things that we agree on, really, if we're talking about like coalition building and getting things done, and I know I'm just like, I harp on this all the time, but especially like on a local level, city level, whatever, it really seems like the sell is like, no, this actually just like materially improves your life. This isn't, I call it socialism if you want, but like maybe when we get, if we nail down a definition of socialism ideologically, I might have some issues with that. So why don't we deal with like the numbers? Why don't we deal with like improving people's lives? Like this guy who worked his whole life, who now just because he got sick, right? Does it make sense that a lot of us are like one major illness away from bankruptcy, that all of it, a lot of people are living on the edge of like homelessness right now or whatever. Like that's, fortunately I'm not in that scenario. So it's hard for me to even grasp right now what's going on outside my little bubble. But like, but yeah, so I had a thing, but it just went away. So I'll just.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting to look at the fact that, like, if you talk to people from like that were alive in the early '80s, and aware of what was going on around them, there were not that many homeless people. Like, that much has changed. I got a chart here. In '83, there was in between 10 and 15,000 homeless people in America or in New York City, total. Now it's 53,000. And the only thing that's happened more than that is companies just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Amazon, Walmart, all the money's going to one place or a few places. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, this is. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, that's part of the problem when it comes to a lot of people who want to fix it from the right. And that's the underlying problem is capitalism. Capitalism works towards this end regardless of what controls you put on it. Like, we had controls on it for decades, and all of those came undone over the slow erosion of time. And that's because that's what capitalism does. It works outside of our public interest. It doesn't have these controls. The system consolidates wealth, and it always that's what it has done for hundreds of years. And so that's part of why, like, maybe embracing the term socialism and being able to articulate it is also valuable going forward, so that we can address those erosions and those attacks as they come forward.
It does consolidate wealth, but it redistributes wealth as well. It's a redistribution system as well.
Then how is it more consolidated now than it ever has been in this country?
Well, it can do that too. I mean, it can go out of whack. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's this perfect thing, but I mean, saying like it consolidates wealth is not like the end all be all.
Yeah, it's not that it can. It did. That's what happened.
Yeah.
It can't do the other thing because it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, okay. Here's wait. I'll just give a brief example just to clarify what I meant. Like the taxi service was broken, and Uber, even though people might say, well, Uber doesn't do things and it's not taking care of its work. There's lots of things you can say, but capitalism allows Uber to work to break up what was essentially a monopoly, and like an overregulated monopoly and a dysfunctional monopoly in the form of taxis, and that actually has a lot of benefits as well. Like, that's one thing that redistributes.
It's not redistributing to one place. It's taking a bunch of different taxi companies and then taking all that money to one company. That's like literally definition of consolidating wealth.
But
we should
just know, making them private.
We should note in California, Uber has actually just monopolized the entire labor market. $200 million to Democratic Party. Now they completely control the labor market. So it's just remonopolized like overnight. So
yeah, I mean, and definitely break labor law. Like that's like I feel like
they own the labor market. They own it now. Like that's crazy. They own it.
But
so Jack, you have a good point in that. Like, oh, sorry, I'm talking over somebody.
I just wanted to address it real quick. And like, Uber's entire business model relied on like pushing out all other businesses in their market. Like literally all of the investment into Uber depended on them pushing out taxis and undercutting them so that then they could jack up prices. It's the exact same thing Walmart does.
Taxis were
but it's the exact same
expensive,
thing. Again,
very inefficient.
It's the exact same thing that Walmart has done in every small like town in America, where Walmart comes in, they drop their prices below whatever mom and pop shop is in that town until the mom and pop shop goes out of business, and then Walmart jacks up their prices and basically owns the entire town.
Same thing Amazon did, and has happened time and time again. Like when you have unlimited venture capital to burn, like you can do whatever the hell you want. You don't have to compete on anything even resembling a fair market. Like it's crazy.
So like this is why if like we want like small businesses, if small businesses are the backbone of America, which I believe they are, this is why we should support worker co-ops, because worker co-ops and socialism through worker co-ops actually promotes more small business. Those mom and pop shops, they can come back. We can revitalize rural America with that.
I'm not the most knowledgeable on worker co-ops, but I remember reading something. Aren't worker co-ops better than regular businesses? Like in almost every way.
Yeah, they're more efficient. They're more efficient. They have happier workers. The wealth is better distributed, like across all metrics, except for one, and that is their ability to consolidate wealth in the top minority of people.
Right.
Well, this is what I like fight with my friends on the right about, is because like the kind of pipe dream of a competitive free market system, like, yeah, I kind of buy into this, right? I like the idea, but then you look at the history of consolidation of capital, and it's businesses getting rewarded for doing business inefficiently, right? And then having the funds to sustain that for long enough time to put the other businesses out of business, or places like Google, right? Like, this is a potential competitor. They're doing things better than we are. We have enough money to buy them and then shut it down and literally slow down innovation that way, right? So it's anti-competitive practices that kind of undermine the system. And so, like, I tried to, like, I consider myself generally conservative. Like, I have a lot of friends, and I'm just like, I'm chipping away at them. I'm like, you understand, right? Like, that you have this, like, whatever Austrian ideal of like free market actors making decisions that are meaningful, and they're not, because we see what like large amounts of capital do. But I would just say, like, I don't know that like the alternatives are all socialism. Like, the right sense, literally socialism became like a solidified economic movement in Europe and the UK, has had alternatives, like policy wise and theoretically, to socialism, to communism, that they would consider, in our contemporary ridiculous spectrum, non-left, non-socialist. So, like, I guess I would worry about, like, we want to double down, we want to own the word, we want, like, or do we want to coalition build with these people who are, yeah, generally on the right, but like also see the problems that we see with, I say we, like us on the panel, again, not socialists. So
Yeah, I think one thing that both parties can agree on, and like this is like huge, is that the government sucks and our politicians suck. And so, like, one of the things about socialism that's like a very viable selling point is the fact that you're taking power and authority away from the government and away from big corporations that own the government and manipulate them to work for their interests. You know what I mean? And giving it back to the people. So I think that that's like one thing that we could really just like hammer on, and like, and whether you call it socialism or not, like that's like huge. I think there's undeniable support on both sides for taking the power away from the government and letting people make the decisions that affect their lives directly.
But the difficult thing is, like, I hesitate to like harp on the government too much, because I feel like it's too easy, right? You get these people who are like, oh, that's just crony capitalism, right? So if we got the government out, if we had a small government, if we had a non-existent federal government, if we had an ideal libertarian state that basically did nothing but execute people for something, like then, right, we wouldn't have this problem, because then the government couldn't kingmake and couldn't, provide real monopolies and stuff. And I think that even on the right, you're seeing people start to say, no, that's not true. Like, just having large amounts of money is enough to manipulate a market to the point where it's no longer free in the way that we want it to be. It's not just when the government gives me this power. It's that, like, accumulation of capital seems bad, regardless of how you look at it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it works in the same direction to be taking the power away from the capitalist at the same time as you're taking away from the government officials. Like, I don't think that those messages are like counter each other. But like, another thing I wanted to say is that, like, looking at like what got us into this situation, and like you can just look at all the examples. We were talking about taxis, like, so like in Austin, Uber pitched the fit when they originally required them to do background checks on their drivers, and they left town for a while. And so somebody came out with a worker owned like program in Austin here, where all the drivers basically were like became owners of the business, and like they ran it. It was completely free to use the service, and like basically they just provided the software, the app, and the rest of the decisions were made by the drivers. And they ended up making about 3 times more than they take home from Uber doing the same business. But when Uber came back, there was a condition that the government would stop like hosting the web app. So like they basically went out of business, and Uber was back in a monopoly again. So like that's like one major issue. And the like ultimately, I think like the biggest factor in like we were talking about like automation, we're talking about job insecurity and like all the kinds of things that have like led up to like NAFTA was a huge part of it too. But like automation has been like the #1 destroyer of jobs in this country. Like 2/3 of the jobs that were lost by like what everybody considered as NAFTA, like were actually lost to automation. So like now is a great time to start focusing on like worker owned businesses or co-ops, because the workers that own the industry aren't going to fire themselves. You know what I mean? They're not going to replace themselves with robots. And like yes, it's not going to be technically as efficient as a business could be if we were using automation necessarily, but like that efficiency just turns into profit that goes into the pockets of like the people that own the business normally. And like if you're running a nonprofit or something structured similar to a nonprofit, you don't have to worry about that. You can distribute more wealth to the people and still, you know what I mean? Like the company doesn't need to make a profit at the end of the quarter. So I think like that's like another angle that like should have widespread support, considering something like a third or like maybe a half, depending on who you trust on the number of jobs in this country, are susceptible to being replaced by automation in the next 20 years.
So I wanted to, going back on this infrastructure thing, I think another thing is related to it, is the homelessness crisis that we're facing. So I was just reading an article talking about that, for instance, homeless shelters are at capacity. And remember, homeless shelters had to lower capacity because of COVID, right? So they reduced the number of beds so they could spread them out. And then they're providing PPE or PPP, personal protective equipment, whatever, to their people who are there. Some of them are having to increase the pay of their workers just because, like, to get them to come to a freaking homeless shelter. And some cities are even housing homeless people in hotels and motels, right? One city, I think, should have bought a hotel just for the specific purpose of housing people. But the article said that no matter what city you're looking at, they're all underprepared for what's coming. So there's the lack of beds, right? But there's also the fact there's going to be an influx of new people, right? Because benefits, was it unemployment benefits, run out like the day after Christmas or something here for so many people. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of people by January, a lot of homeless people, newly made homeless people, going into the system, going onto the streets, and being fees and codes. So what can we do about that? I'd like anyone's opinion on that. I definitely want to know.
Right. So here in LA, like, look, you mentioned hotels, putting homeless people up in that. Like, I understand that it's not the ideal scenario, but we are literally like fighting a war with our city council to just fucking do this already. Because we have a good argument, right? Like, first of all, the land that the hotels were built on were like given to them because the city understood that it would increase tourism. So they gave these hotels the land for free. Not only that, we subsidized them to the tune of like millions and millions, in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars a year. All that we're asking is during a pandemic, you just like let these people that are out on the streets acting as vectors for this virus come inside until we can, get this shit under control. We can't even get that here. Not to mention, we've got fucking Joey Buckets on the city council, like basically restarting the care sweep. So we're driving this home. So basically what a care sweep is, it's a really bad name for it. They just send a bunch of cops in with like batons to like beat the shit out of people at encampments until they move the fuck on. So what has basically happened in my little like borough, I guess you could call it, neighborhood of LA, Venice, is that they've sweeped all of the homeless people off of North and South Venice Boulevard, where I used to like, camp and then park my van after I got one. Back when I was in that situation, and they're all going to the boardwalk. So they're congregating together in the middle of a pandemic. And yeah, I can't even feel safe going outside and walking down the sidewalk without a mask at this point. It's already insane. Now we add on to that we have 35% of renters and homeowners in this state that are right now looking at possibly being evicted or having their homes foreclosed on within the next 2 months. Are you fucking kidding me? And I've got this city councilor here saying, just keep on doing the care sweeps, and I'm going to open up all of the homeless shelters in San Pedro, which is like the other side of Los Angeles from where I am, pretty much. And we'll just drive them all down here, and we can come in here. This guy used to be LAPD. This is how he thinks of things. Like, yeah, it's bad everywhere. And it's particularly bad even in democratic cities due to the policies that democratic city councilors are passing. It's disgusting to me. More people need to be fighting this fight at the local level. we're in the middle of a pandemic. These people do act as unwitting vectors for the virus to a certain extent. So even if you just want to be like self-interested about it, getting them indoors for the time being, and then, you know, maybe building some permanent shelter for them afterwards, just so you don't have to like deal with the homelessness problem, probably be good. I mean, Finland basically just did the thing where they said, we're just going to give everybody who's homeless a house. And they've discovered that like 4 in 5 people are able to reintegrate into society. And for the other 1 in 5 people, you know, you institutionalize those if they have like mental issues that makes it to where they can't function in normal society. But that's the other side of it here. Like Reagan closed down all the mental health institutions. So, and the institutions that we have are so terrible that these people don't want to go to them because they feel like they're going to fucking prison. I mean, there's just so many different levels to this, and we've waited until the worst possible time to have this conversation. I'll be honest, I'm pretty fucking black-pilled at this point. If anybody has solutions, please, I want to hear them, but like, it's bad out here.
I know I'm very anecdotal on a lot of my stuff because I'm mostly just cover Appalachia, but West Virginia, I think it's 60% of renters are facing eviction. We definitely don't have homeless shelters in West Virginia. Like homelessness hasn't been a huge problem in West Virginia. Yeah, I'm also another thing that also made me feel super doomer. There's another streamer, you guys probably know him, Bleep Blom Bim, was asking me for information about you know, different types of like housing mutual aid, things like that, not nonprofits, stuff like that. Couldn't find any. Like search for them, I couldn't find any. And I don't know what we're gonna do here. Like it's
Yeah, Texas is in similar shape. It's really terrible here. I think that we've got like 110% capacity at our like shelters already, and like for what the infrastructure is, and there's something like 30 million people in Texas that are facing like either foreclosure or eviction from apartments or, you know, rental places.
Like I know that we're all doomering here, and justifiably so. My one bit of hope is that you know what spurs change? Like 40 million people who have no place to go. Like that we have policies about how we could address this. We have known about like housing first initiatives for decades. We've known about other places that have tried and implemented successful programs to give people housing, and I advocate for these things on my channel all the time. But the impetus to do them just isn't there until there are 40 million people who have nowhere else to go, who are angry, who are desperate. And as the saying goes, we're only ever 3 missed meals away from a revolution. So, like, either you meet those needs, or there's going to be some really bad shit that's going to go down.
Like socialism or barbarism.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure about that, though. Eucharist, are you having trouble?
I can hear you guys and I can see you guys now, but you guys can't see me, so I don't. I'll reload. I'll back out and try to get back into the room. Sorry about that.
Okay, sure. But also hold on, let me respond to Jack, and I'd love to hear from you on Spectre. Yeah, I wish, not wish, but like, well, I wish you could see a path to that revolution, right? I just don't see it simply by like Americans being deprived. Americans have been deprived before. Americans being deprived now, and like, where is the revolutionary talk, right? I think the idea. I think in other countries that's certainly true. I think if you list so many other countries, exactly that, people will start rethinking the government. But there's something about America, especially in the modern day and age, where I don't know if maybe education, like civil education, has so thoroughly expunged revolutionary talk here, right? Like talks of like thinking of a new government, talks of radical change and the protest spirit. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know what it is, but like we are sedated in this country, and I feel like I think part of it is like the whole personal responsibility thing. That like if I'm failing, it has nothing to do with the government. It's me. Like I it's a moral failing of mine. It's my own shame, right? And so why would I band with other people to take down? And I'm not obviously advocating for violent revolution, but why would I like advocate for anything revolutionary at all if it's my fault this is all happening, not the government's fault.
Can I respond real quick before
Please.
Spectre jumps in? My argument is not that there is going to be like this directed, like intelligent kind of revolution, right? My argument is more people are going to do what they have to do in order to survive. Like when we're talking about 40 million people who are going to be like unhoused, like that, we don't have the infrastructure to support them. We don't have the homeless shelters to support them. We don't have the food banks to support those people. Like when we're talking about like a revolution in this sense, it's not one in like where like you're marching with a purpose toward the state capitol. It's one where you're like throwing a brick through the glass window of a grocery store in order to get a loaf of bread or something like that. Like what we're talking about is basic survival to provide for your family, to provide for your children, to provide for yourself. And like when it gets down to that level, like all the ideology goes out the window because you need to live. And I think when you have 40 million people in that position, this is going to be something that puts a lot of pressure on our institutions and government,
especially with that many empty houses.
Mm-hmm.
My problem is that, like, not my problem, but like, I think the homeless are too good at subsisting in this country, right? We have too much that can trickle down that the homeless can survive. So people aren't. You don't see like skeletal figures here.
I think we will be though. Like we're on the verge of like Great Depression era suffering, if not worse.
The unemployment numbers are savage.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Hold on, maybe, but like I just like what we've seen for the past 30 years is that homelessness is a terrible thing. Mm-hmm. But the poor here are still better off than the poor in many other like third world countries, right? So like I think because we don't fall to that level of impoverishedness, so we don't have that level of suffering here for the most part. That we don't. That's another thing that keeps that revolution, however you define it, from happening. But that's just my opinion. Maybe I could be wrong about this.
Yeah, I guess I guess when I'm talking about like, we have like Frame said earlier, like 50,000 homeless people in New York City alone. Like, if that number quadruples in the space of a month, like we don't like homeless people might be good at subsisting, but in the current environment, we're hanging on to that current environment by a thread, and if that changes, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Maybe. Sure. Let's go to Spectre. Let's go to Brento afterwards.
Okay.
Right. So I actually did the math on this the other day because I kind of went down like a little Google rabbit hole by myself, and it was pretty poggers. So the general strike in India, 250 million people. That's 18% of the 1.3 billion population of India. So for that to be translated into American terms, we'd be looking at 60 million, I believe, is what I came out with the math. So 40 million gets us pretty fucking close to that. If these people were able to build some kind of class solidarity, and I'm a little bit more huffing a little bit more hopium there than Prime is, because like as far as I can tell, everybody that's about to be evicted, Republican or Democrat, is very angry with the government right now. Yeah, that is going to be a problem for them. And I think that the reason that they even paid like lip service to this eviction ban that they've placed till the end of the year is because they understand that will be a problem for them. Now, we've still had evictions because landlords find creative other reasons to evict people and go and file them in court. And then we have to have tenants unions picketing outside of courthouses to block like landlords from filing. It's a mess. But yeah, that being said, they've already kind of taken steps to prevent this. I'm just curious to see if they're going to see the writing on the wall and go the whole way and be like, all right, you know what? Fuck it. We'll cancel rent and mortgages and give everybody $500 a month. Or if they're actually going to be like, yeah, evict all these motherfuckers, because that could get really nasty for them really quick, in my opinion. I don't know. 40 million is a lot of fucking people. That's very well near, like, that's well above 10% of the U.S. population. That's insane. Yeah, I don't even know what that would look like conceptually, but that's just kind of where I'm at with this.
I'm trying to find the exact study for you, Prom, but in a Amy C3 stream, they said that the average. Oh, sorry. They were saying that the average homeless person lasts about 4 years on the street. So
Lasts about 4 years and then dies.
the average lifespan of a homeless person was shorter than 17.5 years than that recorded of the general population. The average death of a homeless person is 56 years old.
Wait. 4 years. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's important. 4 years less than the average person, which means that if the average person lives
17 and a half. Okay, hold on. Shorter by 17 and a half years of a regular person. Sorry. They posted the statistic after I originally said it. So that's why.
Okay, that's fine. No problem. I just want to make sure I heard you.
Yeah, the average, the age at death of a homeless male was 56 years old, 52 years old of the average female. So.
Wow. How inverted.
Brento, you want to go? You want to say something?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to speak to the concept of, the fact that, like, our homeless here aren't skeletons. And it's like, yeah, that's good. It's good that if we have homeless people, which is unfortunate, but as that is a reality, it's at least better that they're not skeletal. That's, in a maybe a culture of excess in many ways that we don't, that we shouldn't be proud of. But, as far as that leads to homelessness, it also sustains it to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want more suffering for the homeless. It's not what I'm advocating.
I know you don't.
I get what you're saying. Like, whenever I think of it, when we look at the homeless problem, we don't look at the main focus should be is, instead of like, is it okay that this homeless person exists? It's to stop homelessness. And right now we're about to add to it at a significant rate. And that makes even more mouths to feed at that level. So I do feel like it would cause a little bit of agitation, especially considering the amount of people, the certain type of people who got richer during this.
CPL.
I would also note, just like to kind of like bring in a bit of finance into like the homeless stuff and like housing is, I don't know if I can't remember what I've talked about before. I mean, Revolt Rise will probably be able to hop in on this, but like a big part of the problem is, like, my understanding and most people's understanding is like how banks work and how money works is like the government creates 100% of the money and there's a limited amount and there's only so much there. But now that the Bank of England, the Bundesbank and other banks have come out, we now understand that 97% of the money is created basically by private banks. So democratically, when we're voting over like where we're going to put money into the economy, we're like bickering over 3% of it. Well, basically the central planning is being done in the financial sector, determining that all this money creation that they're doing is going to stocks, bonds, and real estate. 80% of it, roughly, is going to real estate, and the rest of it stocks and bonds. And so construction can't even keep up with it. You have massive speculation. You have this is why you have home prices driving up so goddamn much. And this is a really big part of the problem in terms of affordability of housing, is because you actually have private banks are able to create money out of thin air. By loans create the deposits don't create the loans. And so this is like one of the really big problems that's actually going on in, well, the banks itself, that's actually affecting the rest of the economy. But I mean, that's sort of a side tangent, but it's an important one.
Yeah, it's a wicked important one. And like, and related to that, we should all just be banks. That'd be a lot easier for everybody, right?
There you go.
Can I?
Your own bank by Bitcoin.
I was gonna say the whole point of like Glass-Steagall and like why it was such a big deal that it got repealed is that like we used to have a separation between the banks that could create money and the banks that like investment like banks or entities that could invest it. So like basically like imagine like you're a casino but you can make your own chips. You know what I mean? And like so like they can literally give themselves a loan that they can gamble with, and that's how we end up with like markets that are so massively levered. And that's why like little dips that are normal in capitalism and we're not going to be able to get rid of no matter what we do cause these massive collapses over time. You know what I mean? So like it's a huge problem. But like in terms of thinking about it, like CPL just said, 3% of the money in the system comes from the government printing money. The rest of it comes from private banks. And so like when we're talking about like, you know, investing in people, giving a UBI and stuff like that, like we're still only talking about a very small fraction of the amount of expansive money that is exogenously created like every year. And so it should be essentially a non-issue.
Just to touch one last time on homelessness, because we've kind of moved on a little bit from that. Just to give you guys like a baseline, during the Great Depression, we had like a 1% rate of homelessness during the Depression. When we're talking about 40 million people in the current United States going homeless, we're talking about 13% of our population being homeless. Like we're talking about something that's we've literally never seen before in this country's history. So we're on the brink of unprecedented times.
That I can agree with. And quickly though, before we do leave the subject, if we are moving away, I do want to ask CPL about the situation in Canada, as you understand it.
Oh man, I'm salty. Go ahead.
Please. Well, yeah. In Canada, like, what is the situation? Is there a large homeless population? I don't know what Canada does for its homeless. Is it simply a shelter system, or do they do? Are there any other additional welfare programs? They have access to healthcare, but other than that, like, is there anything else that can assist
Yeah,
them?
I mean, we do have welfare programs, but you know, I've had some family members who have been like homeless and have serious mental health issues where they're just like so far gone that it's so difficult to even, you know what I mean, just the too far gone situation. And you know, even I mean, we do have welfare programs that can help, but there's even problems where if you try and like go to school, you're not allowed, and they find out, and you get kicked off, and then you're back on the fucking street again. Or like the problem is, you know, some people have serious mental health issues, but they bunk you with like other people who are schizophrenic, and you're schizophrenic, so you're like locked in this fucking apartment. It's two schizophrenics, it's just not healthy, right? And there's no supervisor. So I mean, there's lots of problems with this. I mean, we do have the support, but there's lots of cracks and failures. But in terms of in terms of Canada and Alberta with COVID, I mean, where I'm at right now, we're just introducing the what are we doing? We're doing the triage thing now because we didn't take care of the situation properly, and it's just a way to make it sure that the bodies don't pile up on the streets. So instead, the bodies can pile up in the tents. And we're on the brink of now calling in the military. We've drafted a plan to call it the military. And the Conservatives where I live are going on about like the opposition is trying to panic and make it seem like we have a crisis. Meanwhile, they're the ones calling in the military and setting up this triage tents. Alberta has this massive spike, and Christmas is pretty much destroyed by the Conservative Party. So the irony in that, Conservatives destroyed Christmas. So there you go, and that's sort of what we're facing. I mean, I chuckle a bit, but I mean, like it's the alternative is to cry. I mean, it's such a fucking gong show. But yeah.
The war on Christmas strikes again. That's what happens. On that note, though, something that's been happening in my channel often times over the last week is that we've been talking a lot about mental health. And which is a good thing, you know, like
appropriate.
Yeah. It's so I want to I guess maybe discuss like what are the services for mental health, because when increasing access to mental health services, right, is like the bell that we ring when like a mass shooting takes place here, right? You know, right? You say a prayer and then you ring the mental health bell, right? It's like do that and something good will happen in the future, right? Obviously, we take no steps to actually do that because it's just a talking point. It's simply a talking point. But what would you like to see? What do you think would actually be useful? What do you think are the chances for anything that you want to see actually happening? Do you think there's an issue that can unite both sides? Or like, will any move on this inevitably be labeled socialism, right? And be partisan in the end? Like, is the Conservatives, are they faking it when they say they actually care about this? Brento.
Yeah. I guess I'm going to answer your question with a question, which is like, you know, to convolute it even more, but only because I think it's a complex issue. It's like, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? That's ultimately the question, right? And it's like everyone has their own definition of what it is to be mentally healthy, like what it is to be in your right mind and like valuing the right things and making the right choices and like living in the right way, right? Obviously, shooting up a large place of any people or anything like that is, I think everyone understands that collectively is to be the not right choice. but like like we need to focus more on mental health. The idea is like, okay, defined by who and as what. That's ultimately the problem.
Is that a problem though? Like mental health would typically be defined by doctors, right?
I suppose, yeah, that defined by doctors. That's true. There's certainly a standard. Yeah, that obviously, yes.
So before we jump into the rest of this, I just want to let CPL have an exit. CPL, thanks for coming through as always, buddy. I always really appreciate you being here. We look forward to having you again in the future. CPL, tell the world about yourself.
Sure, thanks for having me on. Good to be here. Canadian Populist left nonfiction book streamer. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Basically, sometimes it gets bumpy with the schedule, but we try and do it 3 days a week. We take a book off the shelf, watch a video from the author, and do a little bit of a read. It's a place to discover some new movers, shakers, thinkers, everything liberal to anarchist. Not neoliberal, talking like liberal. Liberal to anarchist, so kind of heterodox left space. We do discussion, not arguing, and just learn, and that's sort of what we do. So if you're interested, shoot me a follow, and we'd love to have you. So yeah, and thanks for having me on Prime, and good to meet some of the new people here today, and of course chat again with some of the people that I already know. It's good to see everyone, and yeah, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for having me on.
Nice.
Have a good night, CPL.
Yeah.
Good talking to you, man. Good seeing you again.
Yeah, take care.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I want to get definitely back to the subject on mental health. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I don't know. I've struggled with a lot of mental health over the, I used to be a drug addict. I'm not like shy about that. And over the last, since being clean 3 years, struggled with mental health immensely. There for a while, I couldn't even, when I first got involved in trying to tackle that problem, it wasn't even covered under my Medicaid. I feel like that's probably a good place to start, but it shows how little or how not serious we take it. But like I would say that it was like borderline life-saving. So it should be viewed as any other sickness. There are plenty of healthcare professionals that speak on this that are going to know way more than probably anyone on this panel, I would imagine. Not saying that we shouldn't talk about it for that reason, but yeah, I think it just seems like such an obvious thing that we should be focused on. I don't know.
I mean, I went through the same thing in the same area of the country, Appalachia. Like this is epidemic there at this point. Yeah, like I was a mess for years. I was fortunate enough that my insurance company did at the time, my father's insurance company, frankly, through his work, did at the time cover like the services that I needed in order to, like you said, it is actually life-saving work that they're doing here. But what I discovered was an industry that is built to extract as much money out of people's insurance plans as possible, and that will even run them back through the system intentionally over and over, risking their lives further to extract more money out of their insurance plans. So there's a lot that we could get into there, to be honest, my dude. But yeah, it's a problem, and we don't talk about it nearly as much as we should. It's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, like there's so much. I mean, as far as like solutions go, I think the most obvious one is a Medicare for all type decommodification of healthcare in this regard. Like any kind of Medicare for all needs to also be covering mental health care. I think that this has so many knock-on benefits to society that like arguing against it is absolutely ludicrous. Like so many people need to go to therapy, so many people need to have a psychologist, so many people have untreated depression, so many people have untreated anxiety. All of these things, like they're real problems. Like they're like no I know a lot of people like to belittle anxiety issues or depression, like, oh, it's being overdiagnosed or whatever, but the fact is this has so many negative consequences for our society, for our productivity, for all the things that make America great, we need to be able to address these like adults. And that's not to mention like the more serious mental health issues, and or addiction issues, or all of these other things, even when it comes to like violence or crime, mass shooting, oftentimes a lot of these have underlying components that are related to mental health. And, you know, we don't know what would have happened if these people would have gotten treated, like hypothetically, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that it would have had a lot of benefits and stopped a lot of really bad shit from happening in this country. So, as far as what you just said, Spectre, like, yeah, these industries have arisen as like bottom feeders to like feed off of the suffering and perpetuate the suffering in society because it's profitable. And this is a perfect example of why we can't commodify these parts of our society. Like these capitalist entities feed off of each other and feed off of our misery and pain and perpetuate it, and we need to be able to kind of take that capitalist incentive out of it if we want to treat the problem the way it deserves and needs to be treated.
And so just to clarify, because I want to make sure I'm being fair here, I'm not referring to like the mental health industry as a whole. I don't know what Frames was referring to, but what I was specifically referring to is like, yeah, I had an addiction problem. I had like a severe addiction to opiates, and I needed like actual professional help to do it. And what I discovered was an industry that literally hires marketers to basically put out ads on the internet. Do you need help? Do you need rehab? Yada, yada, call this number. And they bring people in, and they basically get them to let them run their insurance to extract money from it. And then when they get done with the program, they will literally be like, okay, well, the insurance, the detox center paid me $9,000 for getting you in, because they charge your insurance like 80, like 90 grand. Yeah. So like the detox company gave me $9,000 to get you in. So here's $3,000, go get high, and I'll run you back through the system and make another $9,000 off you here in 2 months.
That's
like, this is literally such a problem where I live in Southern California that the FBI had to get involved, and it's still happening. And this is what happens when you leave the private market and profit incentives to deal with mental health issues in general, in my opinion.
Yeah, when you're talking about like the drug rehabilitation programs, like you're talking of, like the detoxes, rehab, stuff like that, they also like to keep people in those programs way longer than they need to. And they put you on a high enough dose to where you will go through a worse withdrawal through what they're giving you than what you would on opiates. Not to mention, marijuana has proved to be pretty helpful in helping people with addiction. Some people can hurt them, and that's fair too. I know like there's some criticisms that way, but you don't get the option because in those programs, you get drug tested for marijuana and you fail, they kick you out of those programs.
Well, hopefully we'll be changing that.
Even in California where it's legal, by the way.
Yeah, like the recidivism rate is just ridiculous for like in the United States with the way that we handled like drug addiction, and like there's number of different ways. Oregon, like thankfully, is trying one out, like the Swedish model or the Portuguese model. I think is like really good, and it's got the most like backed research that like to prove its effectiveness. So we'll be able to see pretty shortly. But like I think in all situations, the biggest thing is everybody always harps on is like, how are we going to pay for it? Like, what are we going to do? And it's like that is such a silly thing to be afraid of. Like in almost every case, like there's cheaper ways to do it than what we're doing right now that are also more effective. So it's like we just need to start trying things and like figure out what works in West Virginia might not work in Texas, which might not work in Seattle. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to be different, but we need to try something other than what we're doing now.
In West Virginia, most people have to drop to Pittsburgh.
That's what right.
Well, and also having some kind of oversight to these programs, like if you have like a government office being the ones handling like medical claims, medical stuff, if the government is able to collectively bargain on our behalf and kind of look out for our best interests and is beholden to us in ways that private companies never will be, I think that that enables much better oversight to prevent problems like what Spectre is talking about, where people are just being cycled through with no results. I think that we can improve this system quite a bit.
I can jump in with a completely unqualified opinion.
Go for it.
Like Preem said, like, I mean, I don't know what you all do. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm, you know, I lean on medical professionals to tell me how to treat problems once they've arisen. I don't even do anything scientific. I do fake political science, and so I think maybe like taking a step back from like how do we deal with these problems that are so prevalent. From my perspective, I think it's interesting to think about like, all right, yeah, I can't tell you what to do with the problem that you have, but how do we think about the fact that maybe problems are increasing? And I mean, obviously we have one big reason for that right now. We've got COVID and everything relating to that, but even pre that, right, we have I'm assuming now that we're talking about mental health, there's like a general trigger warning, but like there's, you know, we have an epidemic of suicide, right? It has been exploding in recent decades, and there's like, I think, some really interesting research on like what demographics it's exploding in, what professions, especially in young people, rising at really incredible rates that seem to be tied in some way to use of social media, maybe tied to not having the kind of social connections that they used to, yada yada. There's, I don't know, like, again, studies. Yeah, my friend in the chat who does real political science is telling me to explain more about my fake political science. But the only thing that I am qualified to talk about is I think the things that I'm really interested in. I'm weirdly doing a paper on Plato and suicide, which is kind of neither here nor there, but Aristotle specifically, I think, has a really interesting conception of a political community as a supporting unit that makes you the best possible human that you can be. And problems with Aristotle aside, there's a book that I've read more recently by a philosopher, Alistair McIntyre, called Dependent Rational Animals, who kind of explains from his framework, like, what's really interesting about human beings and the way that we work and the way that we get together in political communities is that our political communities end up supporting the people who would be kind of left out in the cold if we were all doing things from a purely selfish profit motive. So we all get together as these like, well, yada, rational human beings, political animals, whatever. But yeah, but what is the benefit of that? What happens is we end up supporting the disabled, the elderly, the people who couldn't necessarily take care of themselves without those structures. And so thinking about like where we're failing such that so many people are having new and increased problems with mental health, I think is something that's worth thinking about. And then like as far as how to deal with that, particularly as it relates to homelessness, well, yeah, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a policymaker, so I can't do that. But like how, like, I think this is like underlies everything that we're really talking about, which is like, how do we make better political communities where people's lives suck less and where they end up with fewer mental health problems?
I'm glad you went there, because that's kind of like the same thing I was thinking of. You know, like, we're all, in my opinion, traveling through this hyper capitalist hellscape together. I like watching videos from, honestly, Bernie Sanders, Cornel West, talking about diseases of despair. It seems like it's pretty well connected. As we become more stressed, more poor, we become more depressed. And what they classify as diseases of despair are things like depression, addiction, alcoholism, like everything under that umbrella tends to be in all the places that are poor. You know.
So, can I say something after you're done, me, Frame? But I'm listening.
Brent, I swear to God, if you interrupt me one more, I'm just kidding.
You're wrong, motherfucker. No, but
I've known Brent there for like a long time, so
yeah, it has been, dude. It gets longer every day, and it's just like I feel like despair and depression come from lack of meaning. I feel like people need a reason to like kind of go on, and I don't know if they necessarily know why they are. And that's okay. You guys, someone can snicker and other people can laugh. That's okay. But I feel like if you don't have like a reason, like if you have a reason to do something, you can put up with a lot of shit, right? Like most people would die for something they care about, right? Like you die for someone you love, or you die for something you truly believe in, right? So you'd give your life for things you care about. And I feel like when people don't have something they truly understand that they're living for, I feel like that is what is a major part of what leads to depression.
I'm sorry, dude, but
I'm saying
also
it's
like
the reason. I'm just saying that
whenever you're
actually, I guess I am. I guess I'm saying that.
whenever you're like worried about how you're gonna put food on your family's table, or how you're gonna pay your next mortgage, or whether or not you're gonna have a job next month, things like that, I feel like you could pile way bigger than just having meaning through like some weird. I
But-
agree with you. I agree with you that having something meaningful and being able to do meaningful work is a good thing. But capitalism doesn't promote that, I don't think.
No, but I mean that's like that's like Marx's whole point, right? We've gotten to a world where fewer people are starving to death, and what happens is you get more people having existential crises, right? Because now we've got time for it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like even when I'm scraping by, like I now have more leisurely time than somebody who is living a purely subsistence existence.
I don't think that's
I don't know if
necessarily
that was
true.
Marx's whole point, but I mean,
Actually,
well,
I agree. I agree with Comrade Brento. We should go into communism.
Thank
way
you,
we can
Comrade.
do things like that way we can do things like paint and make music and art, and build a house if we want to.
I'm
look,
gonna.
I just
You're
want Star
allowed.
Trek. I want to 3D print my food and explore the galaxy. That's
No,
it.
I mean I want to hear Jack push back on my
Oh,
thing.
yeah. I mean, I think that capitalism, by the nature of how it's constructed, and Marx wrote about this, alienation.
Right.
By nature, it alienates us from one another, from our workplace, from our fellow human beings, and like you can have a higher purpose, and like for a lot of America, for example, like church is that higher purpose. If you didn't have church in rural America, what would you have left at this point? Like capitalism has like obliterated our other social ties to each other. There's no longer like those mom and pop stores. You are completely replaceable, regardless of where you go in this country.
I'm not like singing the benefits of like consolidated capitalism here.
Yeah. I'm just saying like it's not just a matter of us having time now and like we're suddenly just discovering oh god like I don't think it's like that
enough.
but
I mean the alienating and demeaning labor is definitely a part of it.
Yeah.
I don't want to deny that at all.
And I think that on top of that you have all of the economic pressures on like combined, like Frames was saying, like you suddenly are struggling to feed your family. You're also struggling to just have time to spend with like your significant other or your wife or your husband or whoever or your friends. Like we don't have any protection anymore. We don't have unions in this country. We don't have significant worker co-op presence in this country. And like our kind of like Frodo in Lord of the Rings, we're naked in the dark. Like the eye of Sauron is on all of us now, and we can be kicked out of our job at any moment if we toe out of line. Your boss tells you to eat shit, and you decide to do it to keep your job so you can feed your family. But all of this is just a crushing, despair-filled machine if you're not moderately well off. And a lot of us aren't.
Sorry.
It's all good.
The fact that nobody thought that naming a company Palantir with all of the connotations was a bad idea just blows my mind, right? On what you're talking about.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's pretty clear that Peter Thiel is like an evil businessman. Yeah, like just is embracing it. He read Lord of the Rings and was like, Sauron seems like he has the right idea.
There's a Chinese company called Skynet now too.
Oh,
that does,
great.
AI facial recognition stuff.
Fuck.
No, I was watching the latest episode of The Mandalorian with a friend. No spoilers, but there's something that's called like dark something, and my friend looked at me. He's like, "Has the Empire never at this point just looked at each other and gone, 'Are we the baddies?'" And I was like, "I think they did that a long time ago, and they just embraced it, right?"
Yeah.
And like you're saying, I think that's true of some business people.
But I mean that's fundamentally it. Like when we're talking about depression and like the rise in like young people especially, well, guess who's really losing it under capitalism right now? It's the people who've been living through 4 different economic crashes in a very short amount of time. And yeah, there's the economic opportunity of the post-World War II era is no longer here in America. And the only way to bring it back is by embracing socialism and the Green New Deal, and we aren't doing that yet. So
yeah, I mean, I think there's a few ways to bring it back, but I think the most common sense one that would be like a logical like next step for capitalism from where we are and wouldn't be a massive disruption to everything would be exactly that, like New Green Deal and basically government spending on the working class instead of giving it to the capitalists and the corporations, which we've been doing like with abandon basically since about 1998. Like if we had just directed that money at the people instead of giving it to corporations, we'd probably be in a much different situation. But we've got like the lowest economic mobility, or near the lowest of any developed country in the world. And I think the best summary for all of these points is like there's no hope. Like there's like no hope for the future. We're a generation that's going to be doing worse than our parents did, not better. You know what I mean? And it's just like without that, like it's things get ugly fast.
Yeah, I mean, like you can't even buy a house in this country anymore. Like most people in this country can't buy a house, and that's historically the best way of building wealth in this country. And you can't buy a house because people are investing in buying up all the houses so that you have to rent, or so that they can turn them into Airbnbs. Like this is where we're at. Like there's no hope if you're a working person in this country. Like there's very little economic mobility. And like there are studies also that back this up, by the way. I'm not just talking out my ass. Like when it comes to economic mobility, the United States is among the lowest in the developed world. We just happen to have the biggest misconception about our level of economic mobility in the developed world as well.
Go ahead, Spectre.
Oh, I didn't. I mean, I didn't.
I'm sorry. I thought you said something.
No.
Jack,
I was going to call you out, Spectre, because I was going to say this just sounds like our conversations about Adam Smith, right? By speaking of like solutions that I don't think are fully socialist, is like, by the way, there is a tradition on the right, I think, that we can call people on the right back to say like, oh, by the way, there's a problem with the like landlord class. There's a problem with accumulation of rents. Like there's lots of stuff here that I think is becoming increasingly relevant and persuasive in right-wing circles, from Smith to Henry George and all these people that are just like skeptical about the economic system that we have here that we call capitalism, but don't want to be socialists. And so I guess.
So I 100% agree with you, and I've even like I believe I've shown you like the excerpt of Wealth of Nations that I believe makes an actually pretty good case for
Right
worker
there.
cooperatives.
Yeah, it does. It's right there.
And he seems to hate rent-seeking behavior. So I agree with him on his like diagnoses. My issue becomes that his prescription, as far as I can tell, got us here. So as far as I can like pull people that will listen to Adam Smith like back to reality and be like, look what this motherfucker wrote. He predicted, like he said that all of this shit that's happening right now is bad, and that's what he was trying to prevent. Obviously his prescription didn't work. Yeah, like we can have that conversation.
So
but the issue is that most of the people that I'm talking to don't, like, let's be real, like I can't go back to like East Tennessee, Appalachia, and like talk to the average Trump voter about Adam Smith. They're going to be like, Adam who?
Right.
Yeah, so I wanted to push back. Well, first of all, you Chris, your camera's frozen. If you could
sorry.
pop in. Yeah, no, it's fine. Don't need to. You have to leave and come back, or else it won't work.
We'll do that.
But I want to push back on your talking point, Eucharist, and then challenge you and Brento on this, I guess, because okay, so Riverboat Jack, I think, has done a great job explaining the lack of hope in this country and why that's the case, right? But then, what is the right's prescription for solving such a thing? You're saying, well, there's a lot of policies that the left and the right can agree with, because there's a tradition on the right for like tackling homelessness, like through rents and all that stuff, right? But I think Spectre is correct that this tradition is so far away, might as well be imaginary to the modern day GOP, right? To the voters, most people don't know Adam Smith, and they've spent decades like hearing that small business is good, capitalism is good, unconditionally. Like I don't think people on the right are critical, not institutionally, of these things that are causing this hopelessness, right? Not institutionally or individually, right? Of these things. So what would the right, as far as you can tell, obviously you can't speak for everyone, but as far as you can tell, what would the right actually realistically come up with a solution for these things, right? Because the only thing I can think of, right, when I was listening to Jack talk about this, right, talking about the hopelessness and despair in this country, right? It's like, well, if this was up to the right, they'd say, well, you need more Jesus, like the Bible will be the way of doing it. So, am I wrong? Is there something else?
I don't know. Brento can talk about this more really quickly. I would say like just I think that you like let's say the socialists or real leftists in here listening or in the panel, I think the DNC is just as far away, right, in terms of like my like ideological history of what we might call the right. Like I think there is a history of conservatism that deals with this stuff. Yeah, the average GOP voter and the GOP itself is not really amenable to this, but there are some people within the GOP that are, and I think there's a growing movement within right circles that is. In the same way, I would say it's with the left, right? Like the Democrats on the whole are not really amenable to your all's solutions to these problems. It's pretty standard stuff that they just want to keep doing. I don't think Nancy Pelosi is going to love any of you guys, right? But there's some pushback and there's some movement. So in the same way, I think that like yeah, on the right you have people who are advocating for actually we need to break up monopolies. We actually need to address like there's a whole host of things. So I'll let Brento talk about it more. But like I'm not saying that it is imminently practical that this is like right here behind the door kind of stuff. Like we can do this. I'm just saying like I think there is stuff just like what you guys are trying to do is like hey like let's own this word. Let's explain why it's not bad. Let's get some generic lefties kind of more on our side over here. I'm saying like yeah, I think there's some people on the right that are more and more dissatisfied with the status quo, and there are resources within the tradition that they identify with that would help them address it both on like a theoretical level and a policy level. So.
I will say a lot of the. Oh, go ahead.
Please, no, please.
I will say a lot of the like the right wingers from where I'm from tend to actually be pretty good on things like mental health. Surprisingly, like it's more like they're getting to the point now where like a lot of times due to like things like toxic masculinity. I know some people like on the right like to meme that word, but it's a real thing. Patriarchy, they act like they can't even express that they have depression or even sadness. And I think they're starting, at least again, it's very anecdotal because this is like literally just people that I talk to. But they seem to be getting more open about it, especially like kind of the, I don't want to say boomers, but like Gen Xers seem to be a lot more open to the idea of it. And like to see that expand, but I don't feel like we're seeing that as much in right-wing leadership than the government. You don't hear it talked about often.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, as far as like, so could you reframe or not reframe the question, but could you restate the question really quick? Because I want to make sure I was answering it right.
Well, I might have been answering the wrong questions too.
No, I don't think you were, Freems. I think you answered it correctly.
So
as far as I can remember, I feel like I have the gist, but I want to be specific.
Yeah, sure. It's just that when talking about hopelessness in America, right? I want to know what the right's prescription is to handle it, because as far as I can tell, like if we laid out all these issues that are causing people to lose hope, to be filled with despair, and to take take their lives in the most extreme cases, right? I feel like the right's only answer to these things would be to say you need more religion in your life. Like religion is missing, and that's the only thing. We can't actually put any policies in place to tackle this. We can't mobilize the government. Any of these. It's just that like, oh, we've moved away from God, right? And that's why things are bad. So am I wrong in that? Are there other solutions that you think the right would mobilize? What are your solutions, if you have any? Yeah, all of that.
Okay, so there's the right and there's the religious right, but I'm not going to try and divorce them in my answer here because functionally I'm just going to say that like I think you're probably right in the way that they would respond as far as like what is the solution. What you need, like, the religious right would say you need more Jesus, need more church, or something like that, and the other right would say pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What they're essentially saying is that you need more, like, you need more morals, you need more like fundamentalism, you need, and not fundamentalism in like the negative sense, although I'm sure anytime it sounds very negative, but it's like you need more ethics. You need to understand, like, I'll try and answer your question. I'm trying to answer it the best that I can. Many people may not like when how I'm framing it. I'm trying my best. Okay.
Yeah, take your time.
Basically, it's like society, in a functional society, whether that's the American society or any worldwide society, is based on like a set of ethics, and that this is how people have to live together, and this is what it means to be like an ethical and moral and like productive and functional person in society, right? And it's like if society's falling apart, it's because people are falling away from the basic understanding of what it means to be like a functional, productive, and like good person in society. And so if someone says like you're being hopeless and society is falling apart, the answer from the right, whether it's the religious would have their specific answer, they'd say Jesus, and the others would say bootstraps. But they'd basically be saying like you need to focus on like the most basic fundamental things that make you a good person to make society work. And we all need to get back to that and focus on that. And that's a long-term answer. Like, basically, like I'll tell you one guy I knew. He's a Korean man, and he was a child during the Korean War. And I'll be brief on this. It's not going to go too long.
Yeah,
but a teacher, when he was a kid, the teacher he said, like, bring roles to the class, and then the teachers got to have as many roles as they wanted. And so he decided he wanted to be a teacher because he wanted to get as many roles as he wanted when he was older. He was in his 60s, and he was on his first vacation in his entire life. And that's when I met him, and he came to the US on a vacation. And it's like, when people are like, well, Korea is very productive. Korea is like very, forward, and Korea is like a very prosperous nation. It's like, yeah, and the 60-year-old Korean man I met was on the first vacation in his entire life. And he wanted to be a teacher so that he could have all the roles he wanted because he couldn't when he was a kid. And it's like that kind of ethos on work ethic, on sacrifice, on like commitment is like, it's something that is shared in like that culture. And I'm not saying you're going to meet every Korean person you're ever going to meet is like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like that when people who are conservatives say like you need to get back to like a work ethic and an evaluation of what's important and like bootstraps, that's what they mean. And people don't. It sounds terrible because no one wants to live in that kind of life, and no one wants to have that kind of poverty, or experience that and have that be the driving ethos. But the idea that like you work and that you sacrifice for like the greater good, and like from that comes like great prosperity for everybody, is like this underlying ethos of like this conservative idea of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and work ethic. And so that is why my answer here to you, and your answer is, you are correct, that the conservative answer to the hopelessness or the despair or the lack of productivity or anything in society from conservatives would be that we all have to sacrifice more and work harder towards like a greater, like a greater community for everyone through like a personal work ethic and commitment and those types of things. And so I see you, River. I'll let you go really quick. But yes, my answer to you is you're right. And religious conservatives would say that is like exemplified or found through like a commitment in a religion, and maybe non-religious would say that is through like a more perhaps it's more utilitarian and less religious, and it's a more bootstraps conservative kind of ethos.
So sorry, you Chris have another hand up first. So and then we'll go to.
I do want to quibble because I feel like I'm sure you're right. There is a segment of the right, a strong segment of the right, where that's true, as Dr. K is saying in the chat. Like it's viewed as an individual failing, right? Like that's the kind of the sum of it. Like if something's wrong, you screwed up. I don't think that's universal. I think the reason we think of that as a universal right is like, I mean, genealogically, you have this like fusionist movement in the mid 20th century that weds this individualistic, libertarian, Randian kind of approach to life with something that is very ideologically distinct. Like there's a whole argument in the 80s and 90s in political theory on communitarianism versus individualism, and the communitarians are largely on the right. Like there are people who are saying no, we need to, like, we need to think in terms of community. We need to think in terms of your local membership, the duties that you have, not me and my rights and everything else. And so, yes, that's a dominating part of like the right now. But there is on the right also people would say, no, absolutely, we can think about this in terms of like where your political community has failed you and where we could be doing better. And so in terms of like directly answering your practical question, what's the right's answer to homelessness, like I kind of harp on, I think we could all kind of get together and be righties and lefties on a city level and say, hey, I don't know, there's some things we could fix, like freaking zoning, like public transportation funding, things that like people on both sides can get together on. Maybe the Kochs aren't going to get together with you all on it, right? But there are people who are on the generic right who share some overlap here that I don't think are just going to view this in purely you sucked and you failed kind of thing. And yes, Dr. K, you're right. Community is not just a right-wing only idea. I'm saying that there are people on the right who are not these like rugged individualist bootstraps only. Like there is plenty of ammo here on the right side to deal with that as well. So sorry, Jack.
So one of my main issues with your approach, Brento Box, is not that you're wrong, it's that your prescription to whom, how your the depth of your prescription, right? So like, for example, it's useful to say to like an individual person, oh, don't go to that side of town, it's dangerous, right? Versus as a societal level prescription, don't go to that side of town. Like that doesn't, it falls apart. It ceases to be useful. Like, so when we're talking about these issues, we need to have actual systemic solutions. It's not enough to just say, oh, you all need to have better work ethic. Like that's not a systemic solution. It is turning an individual solution into one that literally cannot be made into a systemic solution. And that's my fundamental issue with your response. Not that it is bad to tell people that you need to work hard, you need to be dedicated. Like that, obviously that's not bad advice, but as a solution to a systemic problem that we're facing as a society, it doesn't work that well.
I understand. Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I was just gonna address Eucharist real quick, and like mostly just to say like this is part of where I think the left and the right break down when it comes to these topics, because we can agree on like, oh, homelessness is an issue, but like my solution would be like, oh, we have a bunch of studies that show empirically that like if we provide people housing and like make them no longer homeless, that actually saves us more money than any of these other solutions.
Sure.
But conservatives generally aren't going to work with you on that, and they will instead be like, we need to work on zoning, and like, well, I mean that's great, yeah. But we need to have like this is where it falls apart when you're talking about like socialist policies, because we need to be able to say we are going to tangibly help you instead of like we're going to lower your tax rate by like 5% if you're making above like $50,000 a year or something like that. Like we need tangible things that help these people, like and these bigger solutions are what we need to fix a system that is very broken.
Yeah, I mean, really quick, just to respond to that. We don't have K's. There's K's. Okay, I was like, we don't have a moderator on screen. Just really quick, I like when I say like zoning, I don't just mean like I'm not talking about like tweaks. Like I think, I mean, some people have been talking about in the chat that I'm always constantly reading next to here is like, you know, maybe there's a difference between somebody who's long-term homeless versus short-term homeless, and there's all sorts of complicated policy issues here. But yeah, like we have some serious issues in our city, whether it's Democrats or Republicans on our city councils who are doing things that are just bad for providing housing or making things more affordable for people. And that's something that I think you could have common ground on. Yes, I agree. Like there's lots of studies on this kind of stuff. And yeah, if you could just get some dang conservatives to just look at some numbers. We talked about this a couple weeks ago on public transportation. If you just look at some numbers on public transportation versus everything else you're doing in infrastructure funding that's horribly failing, like it makes sense with the math. It's not socialism. Your city ends up spending less. Like it's not hard to get, well, it is hard, but it shouldn't be hard to convince people of these things. So yes, I think you're right. Like, yes, it is a difficult prospect to come to somebody who identifies as conservative and say, actually, this saves money. You really should be on board with it if what you want is less government spending, but here we are and you still disagree with it. Yeah, it's a tough sell. So I don't want to say it's like an easy solution at all.
And so like this is why like I'm a socialist. Like I'm like, hey, let's get some people who can agree on socialist policies into these local and state governments so that we can make the case. Because right now, there aren't a whole lot of people on either side of like Republican or Democrat who are making the case for these policies. And like if you can go into like a, you know, you have a position on like the in the city and you can be like, hey, let's set aside some money to build some homes for our homeless population, and here are the arguments. It saves us money. It gives us a more productive population who can re-enter the workforce. They can, you know, gather wealth instead of having to put it in a cart that is perpetually at risk of being lost. Like, these are things that fundamentally, whether you are left or right, help society, and it's just that we need to push for these things. And I'm in favor of making society somewhat better.
Sure.
Yeah. So, you were pushing back against Brento. Brento, did you want to have a response to Riverboat?
Oh, I didn't. Well, I didn't feel like it was necessarily too much of a pushback, simply because I didn't disagree. The idea that, you know, systems are important. The systems that we live in, we create them to influence us both individually and society and everybody. And if in a system that doesn't work, like if we were living in a monarchy, no, that has to go. Like, so obviously you cannot ignore the larger system that we're living in, right? And so, you know, I don't feel like there's too much I necessarily disagree with there. It's just simply to speak to, like, your question of what the conservative answer was is far more individualistic. Right, it's atomized. It's at each individual level. Each individual person needs to be focusing and living by these ethics and principles. And progressives tend to be like, no, but we're living in a system. We have to fix a system. So it's different. It's different scopes. It's different levels of analysis, I suppose.
What do you agree with?
I think that you individually, I focus primarily on the individual. I think that's the primary thing.
Okay.
What about the system?
I don't ignore the larger one, but
okay.
Yeah.
So we're currently the productivity of American workers has been just going up for like the past few decades. We've just been straight line up American productivity, but in return, their wages have been stagnant, right? So if you're telling people like, well, be more productive, like work harder, get that worker mindset in your head, well, they've already had it. They've already been doing it. They've already been working on it. They've been working. Before, you know, well, for a segment of the population previously, they could work one job and support a family, right? Now that the segment that can actually do that has been disappearing. More people are working 2 jobs. More people require that their spouses work. More people are working 3 jobs. More people are working those jobs at minimum wage and then still not getting ahead, still needing government services. So how is that a prescription for this problem?
How is individuals more productive?
Like that, yeah. Well, you're saying like the individual level, like you need to have a different mindset, that worker mindset. That's what you said previously, right? So like concerning all those things that I just laid out, how is that an actual prescription for moving things forward and giving people more hope or whatever?
Oh, giving me more hope. Well, individually, but I mean, I guess not individually. I was speaking about myself. So personally, I do believe that people have like the ability to change their situations and their outcomes. I think they sometimes have to work together, but there's also a personal element. I believe that people have the potential and the ability to change their lives for the better and positively. And I think that like that is something everyone has to understand and like believe in initially. I think if you don't believe in that, actually there is no hope. So I think that's where you start. And so you start there, and then you figure out what you need to do, and you might need others, and you might all have a common problem, and then you all solve that together. So that's where I think like the hope initially comes from. I guess the hope is my hope, and I guess what the hope I would offer others, only because this is the answer to your question, is that I think everyone does have the potential and the means to solve their problems. And that doesn't mean that I have like the perfect answer. I don't have anything I can tell you in the next 10 to 30 seconds that's the perfect key to everybody's problems, except for the fact that I do believe that everyone has the ability to solve them.
So I guess to link this back to what we were talking about earlier, like how do you reconcile that with a system that has created us, brought us to the precipice of a crisis where we're facing down like 10 to 13 times more people being homeless than in the Great Depression? Is it because we have people who are 10 to 13 times more lazy than we did back in 1930? Or is it because the system is fundamentally flawed?
Well, you're speaking right now within the pandemic, right?
Well, yeah, within the pandemic, but we were already not on a verge on a road towards a good direction. Like people
Sure.
didn't have $400 to spend on unexpected expenses. If you had something medical come up, it would wipe you out immediately, even if you were insured. So for
Okay.
most people in this country, they were already on the verge of homelessness.
So you're asking me like, could you rephrase that again? Are you asking
Yeah.
me like, go ahead? Because my immediate answer to your question was, well, we're on a pandemic, so it's essentially an emergency situation.
Right, but I mean, like this capitalism operates on like a cycle of downturns every 4 to 7 years. Like we have a huge economic crash. We haven't had an economic crash in about 12 years, and usually what that means in economic terms is that we're setting ourselves up for an even larger crash. And given that wealth has gotten to a point where it is further and further concentrated at the top, which we talked about earlier too, it means that any crashes are going to be exponentially worse because the people at the bottom have less of a safety net. So what the pandemic did was essentially kick us off the cliff, and now we've been limping along on borrowed time, and roughly about the end of this year, we're about to jump off the cliff. So the pandemic did a lot to hurt us, but it isn't by any means the only thing. So my question is whether this homeless crisis was 5 times the size of the Great Depression or 10 to 13 times the size of the Great Depression. Is that because we're either 5 or 10 to 13 times more lazy than we were in the 1930s? Or is it a fault of the system that has brought us to this precipice?
I don't think you could possibly discount like the system. And I'm not saying like the system is perfect. So no, I guess I don't have an answer. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a perfect answer, or maybe even an answer. I don't know.
Okay.
As far as like, I could definitely say the system is not set up essentially to account for like the closure of massive businesses all around the country for like a year or more, right? Or almost a year, not quite a year yet, right? But with no foreseeable opening in the future necessarily, or random shutdowns at any point. Not random, but certainly, unpredictable, or maybe predictable in the fact that no one at any point in the future, and possibly at some point in the future, even if people reopen, they're just going to be shut down again at some point. I don't know what system can necessarily function in that environment.
Well, I mean, we have.
So, pause for a second because I do want to continue this line.
Sure.
But just Frames needs an exit. Thank you for being here, Frames. Really appreciate you coming through.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
You can shout yourself out if you like.
Sure. Twitch.tv/frames. I don't know. My channel was recently described as commie redneck with sexual undertones. So if that's your thing, come by. I play video games. We talk some shit. We talk some politics. I let streamers that I know into my Discord, and we talk while I play games. And it gets definitely 18 plus. So come at your own risk. But yeah, my community was kind of hesitant on me coming on here, and I think they actually enjoyed it. So thank you, Prom.
Yeah, why were they hesitant? I don't understand.
Just because of my past history with debate panels.
Oh, okay.
My personal history with them.
They can't trust you. They can't trust you to be on a debate panel.
I can get a little hectic and into my own head about things, and I'll be malding about for like the next week or so. This one's been really chill, and I've enjoyed everyone on here except for Brenta.
Aw, dang.
Just kidding. All right, I'll see y'all later. Thanks for having me on.
Take
I
care,
feel like we
Bree.
haven't
Bye.
screamed nearly enough at each other. I don't know.
No, I don't think that.
Can I
I'm glad
tack
about
on
that. That's good.
Really
Can
quick.
I say
no,
something?
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
You, Chris, I've watched you go like this.
Yeah, I have things, but Revolt has been waiting, so I don't want to.
I just want to jump in and say that like in my one of the things that kind of like gets talked about a lot left to right is big government and like in this whole idea, and like in my opinion, I agree fundamentally with a lot of the Republican analysis, like or the right side's analysis that like the solution to these problems is local. The solutions to these problems are people like taking initiative and taking like but like you can't do that without tools. And like what the tools that I think need to be offered, we need to be providing is like we need to be taking advantage of the massive like power that rests in our ability to like manipulate our sovereign currency. Like we need to be giving people access to capital, and we need to be doing it in like a way more efficient and way like larger like incidents. You know what I mean? I think we just need to be like letting people make their own like destiny, but giving them the resources and the tools that they need to get it done.
Yeah,
And that's what I have to say about that.
I wanted to tack on, I guess, like, yeah, I'm not. I promise this is not reacting to you. It's just like trying to sort things in my head, and I'm like, I don't know. But I guess like the pandemic, yeah, obviously, like that's a big thing that's like pushing some dominoes down. But it seems like we've already gotten to a point where this could be such a terrible issue. Like just looking at like things like charting, productivity versus wages over time, and looking at accumulation of capital in the top brackets, looking at what the stock market has done while a bunch of people are about to die and be homeless, right? Like we already had a system that led to the point where people's wages and earnings and lifestyles were not keeping up with their value in the system for whatever reason, right? We can explain it, but like I wish I could just like sit all of my like generally right-wing friends down with Thomas Piketty's Capital and just ask them to explain why this is a good thing and an okay thing, right? Like, is this stable? Can we keep going this way? Or do we, like, if we want to, like, is there a non-socialist solution to this? If not, maybe we should all be socialists, but we need to be talking about it if there is.
Yeah, we should be. Yeah, you're
I know.
absolutely right.
So this is what I mentioned earlier, right? Like Orrin Cass has his American Compass Institute now. And yeah, so you guys, I'm sure like there's lots of issues with it, but just like look at what they're talking about. And that's what they're concerned about, right? They're saying, look, there used to be a time when you could work and actually provide for a whole family and retire. And that's not the case anymore. And so we need to address that systemically. And these are people very on the right. It's Orrin Cass and Ross Douthat and all these people that are super on the right that are saying like the individualist approach to this has not served us well, and like we need to either recover or create a right-wing approach to this, or I think they're scared of losing people to socialism like they're doing, like, so
Yeah, the idea that socialism is scary just like befuddles me, because it's like what we have now is scary. Like in my opinion, like what we have now is like we have capitalists we have no democratic control over them whatsoever, and like they dictate so much of our lives, like what time you go to work, what your environment's like at work, like whether or not your company's polluting the environment, whether or not like how much you get paid, whether you're going to get fired, whether we're going to get robots to replace you. Like all those decisions are being made by people who have zero interest in my well-being, none at all. Like in fact, like their life is better the worse my conditions are. So that's terrible. So we want to take the current market situation and the current like ability to like lever the like resources that we have, which the number one resource in this country is like educated and hardworking labor. And so like if we can find better ways to leverage that, like we will have a sustainable like path in the future. And if we don't, then we know what it looks like. We're going to have 40 really, really rich people, and everybody else is going to be fighting over loaves of bread.
Oh, okay. Riverboat, did you want to get back to what you were saying?
Yeah, I basically just that a lot of these issues keep coming back to the fundamental flaws of capitalism, and they've been like these are flaws that like we've known about for a really, really long time, and like the solutions to them are relatively simple on like a basic intuitive level, right? Like And I think that this is something that conservatives can agree with, as well as, you know, lefties like myself. Like, there is a fundamental understanding, if you're a working person in the United States of America, or really anywhere in the world where you're under a capitalist system, that you are getting ripped off. And that perception is not inaccurate. You are not getting the value of your work. You're not getting the value of your labor. And so, as time has gone on, especially in the United States, we've seen this disconnect between your productivity and like your wages, which means you're getting exponentially less now than you once did. And that has made it harder and harder and harder to survive in this country. And that's largely because that is what capitalism does. It wants to cut as many corners as possible to profit the people at the top, even if it comes at the expense of the people at the bottom. And so the solution to this, you know, you can argue, you know, like for an FDR style New Deal, and fundamentally the New Deal was a compromise between like socialists and capitalists, because FDR was under a lot of pressure from socialists at the time in the country. But we have seen, and now we have evidence, that like capitalism cannot be contained this way. What we are doing is essentially just kicking the can down the road to, you know, future generations of people, whether it's 1 or 2 generations down the road, to have to pick up these same exact problems, to have to rectify the same exact inequalities. And hey, maybe instead we should just be like, hey, these are good policies, and we need to figure out the best way to package these good policies. And the fact that they are socialist, I think we're getting to a point where it doesn't matter if they're socialist, because they fundamentally help people, and that's what we need.
Agreed.
Cool. Eucharist, did you get to say you had something you wanted to follow up on?
Oh, I was ranting. I don't know. Did you guys not hear me?
No, that's fine.
Oh no. Oh, jeez. Wait, you didn't hear any of my rant?
It was a good rant.
I heard.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that was basically it. I mean, I would push back a little bit just from my, you know, head in the clouds political theory perspective of like, I think you're right. Like there is like Piketty, right? Like the fact that capital accumulates in the way that it's doing is a feature, not a bug of capitalism. Like that's the gist of it, right? And so the question is, do we have to go to a left solution to address that? And I don't think that's entirely true. But we could. That's a separate argument, I think. So
I would love. Sorry. I was just gonna ask what would the right solution to that be? Because like we kind of have been on the verge of talking about that, but you've just kind of said they exist. I'm wondering like what those would look like.
And
well,
before you answer, because you called me out earlier, Eucharist, so I'm gonna call you out here now.
Wait, I called you out?
Yeah, I gotta call out Spectre, so now I gotta call out Eucharist. Because we're bringing our DMs into the conversation now. You have confided in me in the past that many of your takes to your conservative friends have gotten you labeled as a Marxist.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
like,
because they don't understand what Marxism is. But
yeah, but what are we defining as left solutions, and what are we defining as right solutions here? Because honestly, I think that we probably agree more than we're letting on. It's just we're calling it left and right. So what would
I mean, I don't like the political compass and the political spectrum, and it's bonkers in the U.S. And not the least of which is because our right in the U.S. is red, which is the exact opposite of the way it is everywhere else in the world and throughout history. That just makes me so angry. Like, just make the left red. I don't know. I don't like the political compass. I don't think it's a good description, because I don't think political, whatever you want to call them, ideologies or political philosophies are collections of policy. I think this panel serves to show that. Like, I think there's significant overlap on certain policies that is kind of like we might have different justifications for the policy or different ways of arriving at it. As far as an actual solution, I don't know. I mean, like, I flirt with a lot of things. I really like the freaking English distributists, as like annoying and aristocratic as they are, but like Bellick's servile state is really, really good. he's just like, yeah, capitalism is broken, and maybe we could have had the development of an industrial system in the UK if Henry VIII hadn't ruined everything by consolidating power in the hands of the aristocratic elite, but he did. And so now what do we do? The alternative is right now, like, capitalism's broken. What do we do? It's either socialism or it's distributism. It's either socialism, which is putting the means of production in the hands of the agents of the state, or it's having the power of productivity pretty reasonably evenly distributed amongst people in the population and letting them make free economic choices, etc. So I mean, he articulates this really well, and I like it. It's yeah, pie in the sky, idealistic, I don't know, but there are people on the right who have built off of that. And then, yeah, I mean, just like a generally right approach of like, yeah, we can't have what we now call capitalism. We can't just have businesses doing whatever they want. We have to actually intervene and create competitive environments. And it works to serve what I think are the internal goals of what I think of as like a right perspective of like for market system, et cetera, is like, yeah, we just need to preserve competition and oppose consolidation and oppose the things that restrict competition.
So you might say you'd be in favor of market socialism?
I mean, that's what some people would call distributism, maybe. So we'd need to hash out terms, but
okay.
Like, I think you could sit down somebody who comes from like a libertarian Austrian perspective and convince them that it is better in their system of like everybody's making these free economic decisions that have influence on the market for everybody to be relatively equal in their economic productivity and capacity. I think you could convince them of that, because like their ideal non-normative descriptive approach to economics depends on market actors having some sort of power that they don't in our current system. So
do you think that there's a delineation somewhere between government spending and taxation as a means to motivate investment in like co-ops and stuff like that on a local level? Like, I mean, either ethically or like from a political standpoint, do you think that like one is more preferable, or one could be like potentially palatable to the Austrian type?
I see what you're saying. Like if the same ends could be accomplished with like basically coerce people to just invest in their communities versus take the money from them and have the government do it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's all sorts of like questions and oppositions to, like, I mean, you guys have evidenced some of this. Like, there's some hesitance about like what a large government is able to do, right? I mean, Revolt, you talk about intelligence agencies and CIA and all this stuff all the time, right? Like, we have some initial skepticism towards the accumulation of central power in the way, at least, that the United States does it. So yeah, I mean, that might be a reason why we don't want the federal government doing that, and why we would prefer local co-ops doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, like, oh, I got blurry for a second. That didn't help. Anyways, the solution is ultimately like we're going to have like localized solutions. I don't think there's a way around that, and like I think the best benefit is derived from having small businesses that are locally owned and motivating people that way. But like, I'm just saying, do you think that like we had Eisenhower basically put a 91% top tax rate that everybody harps on all the time, but the effective tax rate was way lower because what they were trying to do was inspire people to invest in businesses and invest in bonds and stuff like that to avoid inflation, because they were printing money like crazy. So like that's one angle, and the other angle is printing money like crazy and just handing it out to people. Like, do you think like as far as like trying to sell it to people who are like politically on the right, do you think that there's a method that we should use that would be more effective?
I honestly have no idea, because as people have pointed out in the chat, and as we said many times tonight, actually persuading people is usually a lost cause. So no, I don't know what would be best, and I don't know how the wheels of history turn.
Totally
so I don't know.
Okay.
It's just hard to find a reasonable insight into the right like thinking, and you are one, so I was trying to take advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably bullshit it for you, but I don't want to. I'd need to think about it more, and
that's fair.
I mean, like, I would say I've seen my right friends move steadily away from, I think, the kind of right that Brento, I think, is describing accurately, right? The bootstraps kind of, it's, you've got to work on yourself, which again, to be fair, like, I don't think any of us are disagreeing. Like, yeah, be the best person that you can be, take advantage of the resources that you have, build good habits, et cetera, et cetera. That just the reality is, like Freeman was saying earlier, like, you could do that as best as you can, and then one health event wrecks your life, right? So like, we have to account for that as well. And so I think there are people that I know on the right that are steadily moving that way.
So So anyways, thanks everyone for that. I think we covered it in 3 hours. So I don't want to take up. I want to respect your time here. But we'll move on to our walk-on panel now. And for everyone else, the stream is not over. Stream is not over. Oh God, the stream is not over. So don't go away. We're going to replace this group of people with another group of people, including you, because you can join in on the walk-on. So yeah, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for coming through or Vote Rise. Appreciate your participation as always.
Thanks for having me. This was a good panel today, I think.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it always is, but it was like it was calm, and like I feel like we actually discussed some things that make sense.
Yeah. The Populist panel gets to do that. Nothing else does.
Look, every panel I'm on, Prime, it just gets calmed down.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Just
you
bring
got
me
a
on.
good voice. You got like I was like thinking about your voice, like when you were talking previously. I'm like, you got a really nice like voice for radio and stuff. Like it's really good, actually.
Thank you.
You do.
Yeah. Revolt Rise.
Really
You wanna...
NPR, and I know it is. It's very nice.
Thank you.
Revolt Rise. Do you want to shout anything out?
No. You always put this pressure on me. I have a book coming out, but we'll talk about that when it's time. Until then, you can find me here, there, and everywhere. I'm on YouTube as Revolt Rise as well.
All right. Next, we'll go to Eucharist. Eucharist, thanks for coming through once again. You're one of my elite conservative troops. And you prove it every time. You prove why every time. So I appreciate you coming by. Shout yourself out.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me again. You guys are super fun. I love these conversations. I usually don't do politics on my Twitch. I play the ukulele just for funsies. So he's shouted out my Twitch there if you want to follow it. That's what I do over there. If you're looking for politics, it probably won't happen there. But yeah, I sometimes come here and talk about that because I miss going to campus and arguing with my friends about it. So.
Okay. Well, hey, Eucharist, if you have any of your friends, conservative friends who like to come on, or you don't have to be conservative, but like if you have friends that you think would be good coming on, we'd love to talk to them.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
Next, Spectre, my mod, Spectre, my homie. Thanks for. Oh, you disagree with the homie part? All right, sure, never mind. But Spectre, thank you for being here once again, friend. Shout yourself out to the world.
Hey, no, sorry, I was shaking my head at like what I consider to be just never mind, chess being dumb. Anyway,
Spectre the lib.
As per, Spectre's the lib. I'm just the rich neoliberal living in West Los Angeles, preaching the most watered down version of socialism that I can, so I can keep extracting surplus value from the labor of all of you. No, memes aside, I'm taking a little break from streaming right now. I'll be back on this panel next week, probably. And then I'll start streaming again the Monday after that. We're restructuring my kind of like content format to be a little bit more clippable. Maybe we'll make some like YouTube stuff. Hopefully avoid the unproductive discourse that I seem to find myself stuck in sometimes. I don't know. But it'll be fun. You should follow me and also join my Discord because it is crazy fun in there, guys. Anyway.
Yeah, my Discord is just crazy, apparently. Random drama. All right, anyway, Brento Box. Thanks for coming back at Brento.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for inviting me again.
Yeah, definitely. I'm always excited, like, Brento's accepted our invite, today's the day he decided not to make up an excuse, apparently. So, Brento, yeah. Thanks for rolling yourself out of bed and onto my screen. Would you like to shout yourself out?
Well, it's not 12 a.m., so yeah, I'm out of bed, right? Yeah. So hey guys, I'm not really streaming as much, but I do enjoy talking to people, going on panels, and having conversations. Sometimes I'm on Tiberius's panel recently. and I'll sometimes come on other people's panels. So if you ever see me on, or if you ever want to talk, you can shoot me a DM in Discord, and yeah, that's it. If you ever want to have a discussion, let me know. And if you ever see me on a panel and you want to talk, and if you ever feel like streaming it or anything like that, that's fine too. So yeah, thanks.
Certainly. Riverboat Jack. I've been crying out for ages for a woman to appear on this panel. You have finally fulfilled that prayer. And now that I have it, I regret it.
Damn, that's cold.
No, Riverboat, as always, I really enjoy having you around. That's why I ask you on everything else, save for the all black panel, but maybe you'll break that barrier.
Yeah, I'll be transracial, okay? We'll break that barrier, okay?
Absolutely. Riverboat Jack, you with your sweet melodic voice, could you shout yourself out for everyone?
Yeah, you can find me over on Twitch. I talk about politics. I cover news and talk about conservative talking heads like Ben Shapiro, and generally just have a good time talking about socialism and lefty shit. And I have a Discord. Feel free to head over to my Twitch channel. We can get you hooked up with the Discord. I'm really close to popping 1,000 followers on Twitch. I'm super excited about it. So maybe if you want to help me get those numbers up to the good old 4 digits, I would be very appreciative.
You are close to unlocking partner, I think.
Am I?
Are you? I mean, I don't know. I've looked at your numbers. Your numbers seem really good. Like when I view them, anyway.
Oh yeah, the like my average viewership is like hovering around like 35 right now. It's
35. No way.
Yeah,
I see you at 70.
Well,
yeah, you're consistently the #1 streamer in politics at 4:44 in the morning.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. But like I've been streaming so shortly so far that like my average is at like 35, but like right now I'm averaging like over the past like week or so, maybe like in the 40s or 50s. We're getting up there. We're moving up.
Yeah, you really are. I think you'll be partner in no time, honestly, with your growth. So everyone, you want to jump on that train, be part of the legendary audience
and literal train content. Don't forget.
Yeah, we also do a lot of train content. It's true.
That
the chat demands it.
Yeah, you want to be part of this legend in the making, Riverboat Jack, right? So you want to be part of that story. The links for all these great people are in chat. So we're gonna roll on to our walk-on panel. Anyone here is welcome to join us. But if not, that's okay. It's very I very much appreciate. We are very grateful for you guys spending a little bit of your time, your energy with my community. And we'd love to have every single one of you back again. I mean, except for Brento, because Freeman doesn't seem like you, so I mean, I don't know.